those clowns that went to like CERN or whatever and were like, I have something.
Bro, how do you pronounce your name again?
Are you saying? Oh yeah. This is not toasty anymore. I love it, bro.
Odam? Okay.
That's what layers are for, man.
No,
We
I
take
want
it
them
off,
to be
put back on later.
Yeah, you guys are all
Huh?
You guys have been finding
Who's you guys?
I'm not, but I just like when it's
for sure.
Yeah. You like to sweat, my man?
What?
Do you like to sweat?
I don't know how to specific.
It's a yes or no question.
Here's my wife, by the way.
I didn't guess. That's what the answer is. Damn.
The answer is yes.
Pressurize you.
That's what we're meant to do, man.
Yeah, I'd rather sweat than
We're born to sweat, man. That's why our sweat.
Okay,
smells
let's get started.
That's not true.
How are you, Eddie?
Nice to see you, Doc.
Still thinking about your presentation?
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Allie, it's good to see you. Have you seen the photos that we took?
Not yet.
Oh, the ones on the phone? I can show her.
Oh, you got no, they're on my
I thought you
phone.
sent it to me.
Oh, you
Come
got-
on, Doc.
It's my living. You been baptized.
Gospel ties.
Okay, we're going to get started. Good morning to everybody, especially Chanda.
Good morning,
It's good to see you, Chanda. And today we want to report back, a full report back from the conference last weekend, which I think was a landmark conference. And I'm so excited to hear more about it, how you all put it together, and you know how you thought this out, because it so fits the moment that we're living in. But I don't want to say a lot, and then maybe just a couple of words about Ukraine, and then we're going to try to resume our reading of Hegel's Science of Logic. If I don't, Seraphina's going to beat me up hard. So I don't want to say very much more. Should I turn it over to Brandon? Are you going to organize?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can start.
Okay.
So, first, I just wanted to say that I'm so proud of everyone who took part in the event. The members of Viet Lao Khmer, the members of the Bandung reading group, and also everyone who was able to take part in the event and make a contribution, because everybody did make a contribution, from the panelists, the tech person, to Eileen, you know, who made the banners, who made the posters, Jeremiah and An, who led the social media campaign to spread the word about the conference. And everybody worked so hard. And another thing, we all had fears coming into this. You know, how would people take this? How would people process the message that we're trying to put forth, the vision that we're trying to put forth, especially in an environment or a social, political climate that is so divisive, that is so much like a witch hunt, which is like a witch hunt. It is a witch hunt, not like, it is. But everybody on both of our teams overcame their fears. And that's one thing that I'm so proud of. But, so, from the beginning to the end, we put forth the vision of the Bandung movement and the anti-colonial movement and the Black freedom movement. And the reception thus far, because I've been talking to people, has been overwhelmingly positive. I think in this discussion, we have to talk about the American people and that they are ready for peace. I had a coworker who's 52 years old, who's been in the U.S. military, the Army, since he was a teenager. And he was very moved by the event. And we talked at work on Monday, and he even told me, this event, the message, the vision that you're putting forth would resonate with most people in the military today. Yeah. So I think we kicked the door open. We kicked the door down. And now the possibilities are endless because we felt the pulse of the American people, part of the American people, not all of them yet. But I think what it indicates is that America, the people are ready for peace.
That's true.
Since the beginning of the epoch of white supremacy or white civilization, they have always used Africans to conquer other Africans, Asians to kill other Asians, and even Asians to conquer Africans and Africans to conquer Asians. For example, in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu and the French colonization of Vietnam, the French used Moroccan and Senegalese troops and Algerian troops to fight against the Vietnamese. But I think what we did was really break that discourse. Because it's used the same way today, where Asian American scholars are pitted against their civilization in Asia and used for the war agenda to reinforce the narrative of U.S. moral superiority. So they use that to justify the war in Libya when they killed Gaddafi. They use that to justify the war in Syria. They called Gaddafi Hitler, which then justified, or to them justified, the overthrowing of Gaddafi. And it's the same thing that's being recycled over and over again, but what we said, the message that we sent out in the statement that we made is that we're not going to be fools for white supremacy and the continuation of the U.S. war regime anymore. We also sent a message which we need to spread to the socialist governments in the world, Vietnam, Cuba, China, North Korea, that we are with you.
That's true.
That we are your brothers, and we're ready to step up and play our role in contributing to world peace and the sovereignty of third world nations, but also the rise of the people in the United States for democracy and justice and the right to a true education. The United States government is the biggest pimps in the world. Now, to understand that statement, you have to understand the pimp game.
Like you do.
The motive of the pimp is to make the sex worker, I'll call her that, dependent on the pimp. Not just financially dependent, but psychologically dependent. To the point where you really feel like you need him. You
Right.
can't live without him.
Right.
He affirms your whole identity.
Right.
To the point where someone who comes to try to save you, and it's like, listen, like, you could do better than this. This is not the condition you want to. You'll kill that person who's trying to help you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they can just string you along like a puppet. But I think what we stood up for was our independence. The independence of the American people to break free from the U.S. ruling class's agenda to control us for the continuation of war, especially now in Ukraine. And another thing is that you cannot imagine yourself without the ruler. You cannot even imagine yourself as a free person with their own sovereignty, with possibilities, because they've separated you from your great revolutionary history. And this applies to black people, this applies to Asian Americans, this applies to Latino Americans, this even applies to white Americans. When Chanda and I were in Chicago for Savior's Day, the Monday after the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave his speech, we were invited on a tour to Mas Mariam, which is the international headquarters of the Nation of Islam. We were with Brother Gregory and his wife, Sister Catherine Muhammad, and we were given the tour by Brother Abdullah Muhammad, who is the National Prison Reform Minister of the Nation of Islam. So if the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is here, Brother Abdullah is like right here. He gave us a tour of the beautiful mosque, but one thing that he said to us is something that I'm still trying to understand the true essence of. But he said to us that you are a member of the black nation. Maybe he had his own interpretation or his own, of it. But we've also been developing our own. We're living in a society that has barred the American population from each other. And I think King calls this America and the other America. One America that lives up to the American dream, but then there's the other America, which is the poor, white, Latino, black, Asian, and others, the Native American even. But our experience with the Nation of Islam, especially during the event, because there's a real deep meaning to it. When Brother Gregory said, addressing the Asians in the audience, come home. Once you cross that color line, and once you pivot and center yourself in Black America, and in our experience, in the Nation of Islam, a nation within the nation, you tap into a moral conscience that is not readily made available to you in quote-unquote regular society.
Right.
The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has played such a huge role in keeping the memory of the Black freedom movement and its connection with the anti-colonial movements of Asia alive and the liberation movements of Africa. He is not taught in any universities. He is not spoke about even among the people who are for so-called social justice. But once the Asian American or the Latino American or even the white or the Black American who has been lost and led astray crosses this line into the nation within a nation, especially for the Asian and Latino American, you tap into that moral consciousness. You can undo or unchain yourself from the lies that have imprisoned you and partitioned you from your own civilizations, and then be released back into the world, into humanity where you belong. So that's my interpretation of what he meant when he said, you are a member of the Black nation. And I talked to Brother Michael Z. Muhammad, who is a writer for the Final Call News, and he also said, he also meant a nation of righteousness.
That's the key.
When you know the enemy, which is exactly what the system is trying to distort and obscure us from doing, prevent us from doing. When you know the enemy, you can begin to know yourself.
Yeah.
When you know what they did to you for hundreds of years, to your people and to all of humanity, and how they use you and how they trick you and pimp you, and what they did to your woman, you wouldn't call yourself a bitch.
Right.
If you know the truth, and you would know your worth.
Right.
You wouldn't be out here with your head down. You wouldn't be out here killing your own brother or attacking and maligning your own brothers. So I have been, reaching out to some of the brothers in the nation. We have an article on our event that is going to be published, I believe, in the next issue of the Final Call newspaper. Not the one this Sunday, but I think next Sunday. Brother Gregory Muhammad, we had a conversation the other day, and he was so overjoyed, and his wife, Sister Catherine, that they were a part of the event.
Nice.
What did they say?
He said that it was an honor. It's an honor to be with us. It's an honor to take part in the event. And I told him that it really does feel like we're fulfilling a prophecy.
No, I think so.
And we're walking in the same footsteps of our forefathers who fought side by side against white supremacy in the great movements of our history. He said that before every final call is published, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan reads the whole thing. And he said that the minister will be very happy to learn about our conference. Another thing Brother Gregory also said to me was, this is what the Nation of Islam should be doing all over the country.
No,
Crossing the boundaries that have been imposed on us by the system. And building solidarity and alliance with our Asian brothers. Where was I going with that? It's a lot to process, but
that's great.
Elijah Farrakhan, who is one of the heads of security of the Nation of Islam, and the grandson of Minister Farrakhan, followed me on social media, on Instagram the other day. And a few days prior, he actually shared our post on the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, because we've been doing research on Muhammad Speaks, and I've told the brothers in the mosque, but I've learned more about Vietnamese history than I learned in all my years in college put together through that paper. They had members of the Cambodian government, the Vietnamese government, China, North Korea, who were able to write articles in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper free of the limitations imposed on them by white media. They probably wouldn't even be able to get it out in white media, because this is what they're trying to obscure. The deep relationship between the darker peoples of the world. And so he saw that post and he liked it, and then later on he followed me. And I just messaged him, thanks for the follow and thank you for supporting, and we hope to continue doing this work for our people, educating our people and raising them up.
Yeah.
And he said, "Walaikum salam. Yes, brother, we are a family in the truest sense. I think that there is something really special going on here. And before the conference, and really, the past several years, we've been ostracized because of our political positions. We've been ostracized for our stance on the elections. We've been ostracized for our stance against war and the white working class. But here we were in Chicago, where I felt no fear among the people. You can speak as freely as you want, and I told Doc this, but it really feels like in Chicago with the nation that you are in a socialist country.
Yeah, basically.
And Doc said being in the nation is compared to being in a country such as North Korea. Because the people are so organized and they're so clear on who the enemy is. Some of the, but our responsibility is to educate one another and rekindle that spirit, because our message, and it still needs perfecting, it still needs refining. Our approach still needs refining. We can learn from them and they can learn from us.
That's true, that's true.
And this is a microcosm of the unity that can be built across the country.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember as we had our delegation, Viet Lao Khmer and Ban Dung, all members of the free school, to the Muhammad Mosque number 12, it felt like things were starting to shift, because then the brothers in the mosque started learning about us.
That's true.
Not just us as individuals, but our histories. So then you hear Minister Rodney Muhammad, who's the minister of Mosque number 12, talking about China and Mao, and how the ruling class of the United States, back then as now, tried to put black Americans against Mao and try to make them hate Mao. But Mao was going against what seemed to be unbeatable odds, and yet he beat the oppressors. And the same thing as Ho Chi Minh. And then in another sermon, I heard Brother David Muhammad, who introduces Minister Rodney. He included the partition of Vietnam in his speech. And he compared that with how they divide and conquer people here in the United States and put blacks against each other and put us against the marginalized people in the United States, the drug addicts, the alcoholics, the criminals, when really we should be raising them up because they're gods. It reminded me so much of that Muhammad Speaks newspaper, because we have all suffered after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I mean, I wasn't there at that time, but it's very clear that the collapse of the Black Freedom Movement, the Soviet Union, and other movements, all the assassinations, the slandering, the attacks, and then the rise of the crooked leaders who have been paid to tell these lies, to diminish the significance of our history. And it is our history which unites us.
Right.
But this informed us as a collective on the possibilities for our future.
That's true.
Because when we read the Muhammad Speaks, what we saw was an exchange of knowledge. Black people learned about Vietnam, Korea, China, and then the people in Asia learned about the black struggle. And then there was a synthesis, a formulation that then lived in the hearts of the people, so that when they were fighting their fight, whether in Korea, China, Vietnam, Cuba, Africa, Latin America, they knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, even greater than their national independence. but international sovereignty from U.S. imperialism. So, this is us rekindling that spirit. And I believe that this is just the beginning. But we can truly play a role in shifting the moral consciousness of the American people from a war-oriented society to a peace and brotherhood-oriented society. And that's all I want to say.
Jeremiah or Emily?
I can say a few words.
Oh, can I say one more thing? So we have a few guests who are tuning in through the, I linked them in through Google Meets. But can you guys show your faces? All right, so these are some of the people that, we've been in touch with. But the first person I'd like to introduce is Odam. Odam is in Long Beach, California. He tuned into the event via live stream. A Cambodian Vietnamese American, and a processing FOI.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's dope, right?
And he's very hungry for history and true knowledge of who we are. And then on the bottom, we have Rondez and Huang. They came to the event in person all the way from Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh yeah, Bowie State, yeah.
Yeah. So, would you guys like to say anything?
I was very happy to excuse me. I was very happy to be able to share the space with everyone. I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we'll have here on Saturdays. This is our first time tuning in virtually, and I'm sure it won't be the last. Mom, what do you think?
I felt a sense of kinship at the program. That's how I would describe it. Yeah, it was really powerful in the sense that we were able, I feel like, to share that community of sort of like radical love, and yeah, it was just beautiful. I sensed there was just some kind of spiritual alchemy happening across each of us. Something was stirred. I know I certainly felt that deeply. So it was such a pleasure. It really was just to be in that presence. So yeah, really grateful for that. So thank you for all your hard work and your persistence, in this movement. So I appreciate that.
And Odam, he said that he was moved by the event entirely, but did you want to share your thoughts too, Odam?
Yeah. First, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to join the space virtually. And, it was a privilege to hear everybody and all the information being given. What was I going to say? I was coming from your typical social justice movement in high school. I'm 24 now, but like that effect and those statistics and data, sit in you for so long. And I've always felt very exactly what the social justice groups in my high school focused on. And then, yeah, just thank you. I don't want to take too much time. Just thank you.
And Rondez and Huang are planning to come to the Saturday Free School next week. From Baltimore, and hopefully we can get Odam here too.
Yeah. Jeremiah.
No, I appreciate hearing the response from people who came who may not have been familiar beforehand. Because I think, as Brandon was saying, it feels like this is just the beginning, or a start in a lot of ways. And I think if you came to the event or tuned in, one thing that was clear was that all of the people who were organizing and speaking, it was almost like we had too much to say. It was like it came almost bursting out of us. All of this history, you know, all of this, also this belief and this conviction and this sense of what is possible that has been hidden from the younger generation in this country. And, you know, going back to the start of this whole project or endeavor with the two groups, I can speak, at least for, you know, for the Bandung people, that one of the, you know, even the initial ideas which propelled us towards this was, you know, we had independently started studying Korea, the Korean War, the history of the Korean independence movement, trying to figure out, you know, like which leaders to look to, all of that stuff. But also we had been studying the Bandung Conference as well as the non-aligned movement, in which you know, Vietnam played a significant role. And I remember, I think it was after we had read one of the speeches by Pham Van Dung, who was, I believe, the Prime Minister of Vietnam at some point, speaking at a non-aligned movement conference. And I think we got this feeling that, wow, there is so much for Korea to learn from Vietnam's experience. That was one of the very first feelings that we talked about. And likewise, there's so much for, in the same vein, there's so much for Asians in this country to learn from the Black struggle. And in a way that's very humbling, but simultaneously it fills you with a sense of pride. You know, pride that you can begin to discover the great heritage, which is your birthright. Whether it's in your country or the struggle of another country, because as Brandon was saying, they were all fighting for humanity. And there was this broad understanding that they were fighting for the future of humanity. And so I think, you know, that was part of the, at least even for me personally, that was part of the motivation for wanting to do this, was this sense of there is so much for our people to learn from each other, to learn from each other's struggles. And we really wanted to convey this message that, you know, there is this world movement that took place, a world peace movement, the world anti-colonial movement, the world socialist movement, all of that was part of a single fabric. And it is there for you to see as your history, as your heritage, if you want to. That option is always there. We wanted to say there are more options available than you may have been taught. And you know, we don't want to tell anyone how to think or what to think, but we want to say there are alternatives to this worldview and this system which has been ingrained in so many people in this country as a result of the propaganda and the miseducation. And yeah, I think looking back on the event, one of the things that, you know, struck a lot of us was, and was part of our motivation for this was, you know, we wanted to create a space in which people who would never otherwise get a chance to meet and to be together in the same room would get a chance to do that. You know, Asian Americans and people from the Nation of Islam. Like nowhere else would you find, I think, that kind of, that space where like actually diverse groups would be able to come together and to experience this collectively. And so so I think that was, because, you know, even like from the perspective of, you know, like an Asian American, you know, who may come from like a college educated background, or anyone from that kind of maybe more liberal, like college educated background, like I think even seeing, observing how the fact that the people who are the most enthusiastic in responding to our message were people from the Nation of Islam, you know? Like, and what does that do to someone who is not used to that worldview? What questions does that raise in your mind of like, oh, do I really know myself? Do I really know my history? Why is it that these people, like, are so enthusiastic about people, like, you know, leaders like Ho Chi Minh, Kim Il-sung, the anti-colonial struggle, and can so easily grasp that underlying logic of unity between these peoples? Like, why, if I have hesitations, what are my hesitations, you know? Like, what's holding me back? And, you know, that, I think that was, part of the effect of the event. And then I think, just briefly, you know, this idea that Brandon talked about of, you know, people having self-determination in this country, the self-determination and the freedom to say, these are our leaders, this is our history, these are the values that we want to cultivate in ourselves and in our children. You know, I think that was something which really came across with the whole event, but also the, you know, the Afro-Asian dialogue where we brought together Brother Gregory from the Nation, Catherine Blunt, and Pastor Tehu Lee. And, you know, I think one of the feelings that we all had was we wished there had been more time for conversation and dialogue with the audience and among the speakers. But regardless, I think what was very clear to me was, you know, all of these people represented and spoke to the importance of the people need to define on their own terms what the agenda is.
That's right.
You know, and maybe not that message has never been presented to some people before, but I think they all really embodied, like, philosophically, politically, culturally, like, the people have the capacity within themselves to, like, reject what the mainstream media and the ruling class has told them they should believe and what they should be even proud of in terms of culture. And, you know, they have the capacity within themselves to say, no, we want peace on these terms.
That's right.
On our own terms, on the terms of our leaders who we actually have defined for ourselves and who we look up to. And not the sort of celebrities who have been presented to us as the ones that we should, like, take our cues from. And yeah, I wanted to briefly also read Xiao Yin, who gave the very first presentation in the first panel about the Bandung movement and King's World House. She had some reflections, and I think everyone else also from the event has thoughts, but she says, I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish for the event and the impact it has had on those who attended, particularly how the participants resonated with the speeches or discussions and are eager to learn more about what we studied. I am also proud of the journey the Bandung and Viet La Khmer group went through to make the event happen, building relationships with the community, uncovering the truth of the Vietnam and Korean War, and trying to draw connections between the anti-colonial struggle and the Black freedom struggle. All of our hard work culminated into a very successful event where ordinary people can just come in with friends, families, and community members to engage in a dialogue for unity and peace. And I was also very moved by everyone's presentations because everyone had a unique perspective. Yeah, a unique perspective to contribute to the discussion, and what they said came deep from their hearts. Our thinking has developed so much through organizing this event, and I'm excited to see where we go from here. Yeah, which I think just very perfectly encapsulates all of that. So yeah, those were some of my thoughts on the event.
Oh, it's hard to figure out where to begin. Well, I actually first want to thank you, Doc, because although this was organized by Viet La Khmer and Bandung, so much of the reason why we even read culmination of close to an 8-month process, close to a year of two groups of people who were reading independently coming together. I know it seems wild because that's a lot of months, week after week reading together. But I wanted to thank you, Doc, because in a lot of ways, like Brandon and I have talked a lot about this, but for us, it's fighting for the vision of the free school. Something so many people, people come in and out to the free school, but a lot of people don't believe in it anymore. And I understand, like, in these times, it's, like King said, it's a hostile world. And in a hostile world, it becomes easy to give up, to lose hope, to stop coming. But a lot of this event, and it was very emotional for all of us, not just because it was 8 months in the making, but it felt like we were coming into our own. Like our whole lives, and this is also why I cried when I went to the nation, and I heard Minister Rodney say, I never thought Mao was my enemy. Mao was my hero.
Yeah.
Because my whole life, and it's the same for Ho Chi Minh, it's the same for Kim Il-sung, you're taught to be ashamed. Like I was taught to be ashamed of what Mao did. And it's because of you, Doc, and the history you gave us, back to us, and the free school, and then hearing the nation speak and being able to know the significance of Minister Rodney. So ostracized by society, the nation, demonized, portrayed as hateful, portrayed as anti-this, anti-that, to hear him say, I never thought Mao was my enemy. It felt like I was free, And I think for us to read this history, I'm Chinese, but to read about the Korean people, all they went through, what they go through to this day, to read about Ho Chi Minh and how he so demonized by the West, to read about how he, on ships, he made a friend with the white sailors, he made friends with other Africans who were also colonized by the French. Wilfred Burchett, like the journalist, a lot of our readings are based off Wilfred Burchett, an Australian journalist who literally sacrificed his life for this. Couldn't go back to Australia, but he kept on telling the truth of what the West was doing to the people of Vietnam, Indochina, to Korea, China. And to read what Wilfred Burchett was saying about Ho Chi Minh, and how Ho Chi Minh, because he was always in the pursuit of freedom and self-determination, he could find something positive in every person and in every anti-colonial movement, including the American Revolution, which is why the Vietnamese Constitution literally has the words of the American Declaration of Independence, something that I don't know if the American people will ever claim again, but they should. But I wanted to thank you, Doc, because, I was trying to think a lot about, you as a mentor, teacher, but also the free school. The free school, it's the apparatus of ideological clarity, and I do think in our event, it was us furthering the struggle of ideas. And there's something really beautiful Serafina mentioned to me where she was like, being in that room, it felt like we were at a World Peace Conference. It felt all the different people, young, old, different occupations, different races, religions, ethnicities. It felt like a World Peace Council. Eileen's beautiful designs, the doves, the imagery, the colors. And every person has a place in the struggle for peace, if you so choose to be in that struggle. And if you have the courage to stand on your 2 feet, to stand on the foundation of all these leaders, and instead of demonizing them like you're taught, instead to look at the history to see the truth. I mean, a lot of that is the foundation that you set, Doc, and the free school has always talked about world house, beloved community, single garment of destiny. And I feel like in a lot of ways, looking backwards, this event is just a further development of so much that we have done over so many years, like before I even came into the free school. But even looking to, like when we read Russian America last year, Du Bois' unpublished manuscript, which was never published because of anti-communism. But where Du Bois ends his whole manuscript saying, it's the chapter World Peace. That Russian America back in the 1950s has so much in common. you know, people who wanted to fight for freedom, people who, like countries built upon anti-colonial struggles, and who share to this day the common ideals of their people, which is that we should abolish poverty, that we should abolish, I forget the other thing, but abolish poverty, abolish war. And then the conference on China,
Yes.
like you said it yourself, I think that is what gave us courage. I do think that is the beginning of us having the courage to even have the event that we had last weekend. You know, and then the Winston conference where we talked about the tradition in this country. What is the substance of freedom? You know, the conversation about the stranded population. In some ways, the stranded population is only bigger today. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Doc, because a lot of no, it's true. Like, we are the free school is the teacher of teachers. And for us, we hope that we could teach some of what we have learned. And I also want to thank the nation because, you know, I talked about the emotional experience of going to the nation, but man, hearing Brother Gregory speak in that room on that panel, that does something to you. When he started saying, he literally said, he was like, I'm still on probation to this day. I have turned my life around and I'm on probation.
Yep, he did.
But the system doesn't care. The U.S. state doesn't care. The U.S. state wants to put me back. And he said, I don't care that I'm here in a room of revolutionaries. I'm proud to say I'm here in a room of revolutionaries.
Wow.
And I'd be happy if they took me back to prison. Because I love Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Right.
The nation saved my life.
Right.
The truth saved my life.
That's right.
Right.
What are we without the truth?
Right.
And yeah, and I just want to echo what Brandon was also saying, where, I mean, this is, like King said, there is such thing as being too late. But I don't think the young generation is going to wait. And I think you saw that in that room.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made me so happy. You know, it actually made me kind of depressed on Sunday because I was like, I miss that feeling. You know, it makes you just want to go back in, go further and further, closer and closer to all the people who are asking questions. I think especially young people, they're ready. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Just piggybacking off that comment that you made, why I was thinking about this event being similar to or equal to something that the peace movement would do. Because similar to what Brandon was saying, and I guess similar to how we're feeling, we've entered a kind of new stage. And I think the event was on time for that. But I'm not saying much right now. I just wanted to say that I was clearly thinking this as opposed to maybe in previous events. There was just there was something concrete, or maybe it was the level of development of how much everybody who prepared for the event did prepare for the event, and their articulateness, and also the purposefulness in picking who's where, why they, and what are you showing throughout the event, whether that be the King's speech or the dancers. But I just felt like that we were on time with this event, and I felt that in so being, this question of peace is on time for right now.
Right.
And whether that be like, I'm not sure how to say it right, you know, if it'll be a new peace movement or something like that, or if in fact we are, and I think this is really what it is for me. What Brandon said, we are in the footsteps of history, and we are taking up the responsibility of history. I just think that the event was a peace conference, and it could be reported as such. That's all. I just really,
Kathy, would you?
I might need a moment to also
Okay.
collect myself.
I also just wanted to read out a comment from Nandita. Nandita says, to Jeremiah's point about creating political dialogue where different kinds of people can come together to seek the truth, we are so lucky to have the example set by the last 10 years of the Saturday Free School, and Doc and others work to keep it moving no matter what.
yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Meghna?
Yeah, I mean, it just felt like a victory and a vindication for everything we've been working for all this time. And just how everybody brought so much of themselves, seeing everybody develop and make a contribution. You know, people always, I mean, speaking of Doc, people like to accuse Doc of telling us what to think. But the thing is, no, we're getting a training of how to reach the truth. And just so much original insight and analysis. I'm just still thinking about Eddie's presentation. Because honestly, we didn't know how to do this. We didn't know how to do the question, but you got to the Latino. First of all, you talk about the Latino worker, which nobody ever wants to talk about. And then you related it to the black worker. What is the contradiction? And you related it to that history of Reconstruction, the anti-colonial struggle. And this is the synthesis we need to be doing. And it was just, it was just beautiful because it's like, well, this is why we need a movement. We need everybody. We need people to develop themselves so we can, move history forward. And it was just a beautiful vindication of everything we've been working for. Because you can get low sometimes. Because we aim so high. We talk about, such beautiful things. And you can get really low. We all struggle with, is it possible? Can we do it? Will the people believe in it? Do we believe in ourselves? Can we work together? But this is just one of those moments I'm going to always come back to in my head, and I never want to forget. This is us. This is what we're capable of, and we will bring many more people in. We'll keep growing this, and we will be an unstoppable force.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just responding to your compliments.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember when Emily and Brandon talked to me about the panel that I was supposed to do. I was very confused at first. I was like, y'all just want another immigrant, man? Y'all got a lot of immigrants already. But going through it, and the way she talked to me about it as like the expression of the World House. Honestly, it felt very comfortable going in there and talking about the black worker and the Asian anti-colonial struggles. Like, it just felt, I felt very naturally at home. And I think it helps to, talk about like specific history of like different Latin American countries to like identify with more.
Yeah.
Even if it's just looking at somebody that looks like you, I think it definitely helps. But truly, just like on its own, I think the Asian anti-colonial struggles and what has happened in this country, I think it's something that everybody can easily identify with. And I'm very grateful for y'all for helping me reach this kind of closeness to the human family.
Lori, would you like to say something?
Well, I think, I just agree with everything that everybody else has said so far. The amount of, thinking and working together that we've done over the last 8 months. It was reading, it was getting to know one another, but through our histories, first and foremost. And even, in the process of planning
planning the event and working together, I feel like that was something pretty special. Like with the pamphlet, we started working on it in like December and January, and first it was kind of just going through all of the months of readings that we had done, and realizing that we had so much that we wanted to share through the event and through the program, but that realistically we wouldn't be able to fit it all in one day. And so I think that's what motivated us to like make the website and make pages on the website for like Rochette and the Wars, and to post on Alchemy's Instagram page, and also to make the pamphlets so that people who maybe like wouldn't be able to make it would still be able to take part of that with them. And yeah, so we like collected all of the things that we had read, and then we were trying to like synthesize it together. And there was just something really special about that, which I think other people have remarked on. But it's that like the peace movement and what we're fighting for, everybody is needed and everybody has something to contribute. And I think seeing that woven together, like the different ways that people think, the way that people speak, like that you express yourself, and it has a place here. And I think that's also what I felt with like the cultural performances, because I was kind of worried at the end because we were running a little bit late, and so we were supposed to be like in the Q&A section when all the performers were arriving, but we were still in the panel, and so I was, I think, a little bit worried because I was like saying stuff about North Korea, and then like 40 or like a few dozen Korean parents and like little children, and I was like, oh boy, like I guess this is going to come out, but it has to come out. Like if this isn't the ideal way that, you know, I'd like to broach the subject, just dropping people in, but it still has to be said because it's true. And I think part of me was worried that, you know, maybe it's too much, too sudden, and that people wouldn't want to perform or anything, but like they still wanted to, and they got up there, and like seeing how appreciative everybody was, like you could feel how much like everybody was like, wow, like I understand this. And I do think the performers also like resonated with that. We're like, oh, like people really appreciate what we're doing and are engaging with it like on a deep level. Like they see something in it. And I think like with the K-pop dancers, like the Cambodian dancers, like they're also watching the Korean dancers.
Yeah,
I think also with like this is also something that's, I think, a staple of free school events, which is that you have the presentations, you have the panels, but you have culture also. And it shows how much like culture both reflects but also can lead the way for people to feel like what it is that we're fighting for. And I also I wanted to share a little bit more about the Korean dances. I didn't have time to like say anything about it, but the first dance, which was like the younger children, that's like the little girls with the flowers. That one's more like simple. It's called like tagaktism, and so it's referring to like an idiom, like a Chinese idiom, but it's a peony dance where basically lovers are like exchanging flowers, and the flowers are like so fragrant and beautiful, and as they exchange it, they're basically affirming like their devotion and their love for one another. And so it's kind of like we won't be torn apart, like we'll always be together. And so that's really sweet. And then the second
really nice.
to think about it like metaphorically in the event. That's nice, I didn't know. And the second dance performance is more, I think, like well known, like it's more of a staple. It actually has a tradition. It's relatively modern. So it's called taepyeongmu, and so te is like big, like large, great, and then pyong is like peace. Like kyungwa is peace in Korean, and then mu is just dance. So like literally it's like a great dance of peace. And so this dance is basically performed like as a prayer, like an offering for like peace and prosperity in the country. And the history that I looked into is that it seems to sort of originate from the area of like Gyeonggi, and so it was sort of a court dance where you're performing like for the king. And so it has like ancient roots, but then after like Japanese occupation and colonialism, like the Japanese were trying to stamp out Korean culture. And so it came out as like a court dance, sort of saying like, no, we want our country, like we want our leaders, we want our culture. culture. And so they tried to like ban the dance and make people like not wear the court costume since it's performed in like the court costume of like the king and the queen. And so there are like a lot of different stories about it, but some of it is one lore that I read was that like you have a shaman or like a spirit who's like possessing the king, and so it's like the people who are like, we want our country and we want stability, but we can only have that on our own terms by achieving peace. And yeah, I think just aesthetically also like we see really like delicate and graceful footwork, but there's also like strength and form. And so yeah.
What about the drummers?
Drums I feel like are just drums. I feel like Nathan said something interesting afterwards, where Nathan was like, after watching the Korean drummers, especially the men, you know, the young boys, and the way they are looking at the central teacher to show them the way. This way the central teacher is literally yelling, and it was so nice to hear that like that he's actually a high school student, right? The central teacher is a high school student, and to hear him yell like that, Nathan was like, now I know how the North Koreans won the war. With the drumming.
But it actually reminded me of Universal African Dance on
Everything's
similar. Because it's the same format. Improvisation, but then also giving the young the chance to shine. You know, like it's all for them. You know, and then even though you have so much skill, it's all about the beauty of the young, and also I mean the jazz connection is there, the improvisation. But just the sense of this common human family, all the same origin. You know.
Oh boy. Wait a minute, hold back. Chanda, would you like to say something? I know you don't like to talk a lot, but could you, just your reflections?
I just put a mitt in my mouth. Let me see if I can talk with it.
Okay, just take a moment. I'll call on Doe, who's never lost for words.
I mean, to add on to the discussion about the cultural performances, I feel like the spirit in which those boys beat the drums is not even close to what you would see in like a youth orchestra performance. There was a spirit and essence in the way they performed that I think you see so rarely in children. And, I don't know, it really brought home the point of how beautiful history and heritage is and what kind of impact that can have on developing culture. And I'll also just never forget the way Minister Gregory Mohammed was so into the performances. And I was sitting behind him, and he had his phone out and like, you know, was recording it the entire time. And I never imagined that I would see these young Asian children in the same room with the Nation of Islam. It really made sense ultimately. And I think my overwhelming feeling after the event is this feeling that unity is really possible. And I know quite a lot during my presentation. I'm going to cry again. But I think there was a particular moment when I was talking about the unity between Korea and Vietnam. And
It's emotion. Take your time. It's emotions.
I couldn't stop crying because
It's emotions.
well, I couldn't stop looking at on our panel, on my panel, who's not here right now, but is part of the Alchemy. And I also couldn't stop thinking about Eileen and Chanda and Brandon. And,
Oh, man.
I mean, it was beautiful to get to know this another group of Southeast Asians throughout this process, personally. But I think it was just very beautiful
That's amazing.
to see in person experience a certain unity based on the values and principles
That's a real blessing.
that we have developed.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That was blessed.
And I also wanted to echo what Emily was saying about being so grateful for you, Doc. And I mean, yeah, I think in many ways our event felt like a culmination of not 8 months of meeting, but really years, and beginning at Cornell's,
Yeah.
where a lot of the members of the band met. And although I wasn't even really present when you came all the way to Cornell to speak, like that had a major impact, and we wouldn't have found Asia without the Black Freedom Struggle.
Yeah.
Having Du Bois, having Dr. King involved. And it was through the Black Freedom Struggle that we were able to actually look at Asia and turn our hearts towards Asia, and really free ourselves from, I guess, this war agenda that had that has been so ingrained in everywhere that we look. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that partially I was crying because I was just.
That's tears of joy. Yeah. That's
Joy, but also, I was also crying in my presentation partially because it is deeply saddening to see the war agenda so prevalent around us. And yeah, I think in the back of my mind also was my impending departure. To ultimately deal with, I guess, the mandatory service that I have to do with the Korean Army. And I don't know, I think the free school is my political and ideological nucleus and center and home. Even though I'll be there for a bit, I'm just really grateful for what we have built, and I'm just really excited for the years to come and to be part of that.
That's true.
Shonda. One more.
On says, love you, Doe. Yours was a brilliant presentation.
I feel really like I'm so overwhelmed, but in a good way. I don't know where to start, but if you didn't know, Doc, I'm a crier just again. Maybe I'm like second though. But no, like, as for me, with, when we had started, well, when Brandon actually started the Alchemy page and just followed only maybe like 30 people with no posts. And he brought up the idea to me, and I thought it was very beautiful. But I just didn't imagine that it would get this far with all the followers and all the stuff we've read and the post we made and the connections. It's just crazy to me. I'm just really proud of how far we've came together. But also, I'm very thankful for being introduced to this. I don't even know the word to describe it. Not a lot of people know but I came from California to Philly. Long story short, I was a single mom, and it was tough doing it by myself in California. And it was always like conversations between my mom and my sister convincing me to come here to Philly to start over and get help and get support. But I was so stuck on just doing it on my own, going to school and work. But it was really hard making it day by day. And I was really lost. I felt really lost. But having come to Philly and having learned and reading, just like all the readings we did, and then even when we joined Bandung and doing all this, I was really, my confidence was really low because I didn't know anything about my history. I didn't know anything, and I'm sorry, like, I didn't read about anything. And sometimes it's hard to say because it's just crazy how much I know now, but also how much I know as in the truth of what I know, not just what I learned in school, which we're miseducated. And it's just given me a lot of clarity in my life, but I really, really don't feel alone anymore since we've done this. And just like when we had postponed the event because the weather, the elevator and stuff, and the concern of, I could just imagine elders walking up 3 flights of stairs. How is that gonna happen? And the drummers, and I was just like, that, it just didn't sit right with me. But I was really glad we postponed. And then having going to Chicago with Brandon, it was so much reflecting, and I'm still reflecting on that. And then on top of the event, I just feel like everything I've gone through life that was hard, it was like this time I was like really blessed with everyone. Having meet you guys and doing the event. And I remember I had conversations with Brandon. I keep going back and forth. I had conversations with Brandon asking, like when we read about all these leaders and revolutionary leaders in the world, I was like, but who do we have now? Like now. And, you know, we mentioned Doc. We have Doc. I know. But no, like, just who to look up to, who's going to teach us, who's going to tell us the truth. And then on top of that, you know, Doc came to mind first, but the Nation of Islam came to me. And I have the utmost respect for them. And I don't know, I'm just still trying to reflect on everything. Like, I feel so many things that I feel like I can't get out. But I'm just really happy and thankful for everyone who was a part of it. And it just feels really, I'm just really happy and wish I found this sooner. Wish I knew sooner and learned about my history sooner. And I just been on a rant with like looking up documentaries and YouTube videos, and I just ordered a whole bunch of books on Cambodia because I'm like, I know about my history, but it just, the whole event after, I was just like, I want to know more and I want to know the truth. Yeah.
Well, Chanda, it's very hard to follow up all of that, but the first thing I really did want to say is that, like, we just really want to reciprocate also from the Bandung group, and I know I personally, and I think many people have also felt this, that, I mean,
from your contributions, Viet Lao Khamai's contributions, and our partnership, our two groups. The only way I feel like that's best to describe this is that Catherine Blunt in her presentation in the Afro-Asian dialogue was that like there are times when it's very low, but when we see examples and we learn from people like you and from Eileen and Brandon and An, like even us, especially us as young Asians that, you know, started all of this at Cornell, but, you know, we learned some of this, but we fell in love with the single garment of destiny all over again. We fell in love with the beloved community and the World House all over again because we saw how much it impacted you all, and your growth has really helped us grow. And I like we couldn't have come to Philly ourselves as a lot of young Asians from Cornell, just trying to you know, bring ourselves closer to this training that we could possibly get from free school and dock into all the incredible history and all the potentiality here in Philadelphia. But really, like, you know, there were times maybe when we first moved to Cornell, or not to Philly, that we were like, how will this manifest? Like, we're starting to see all these threads through history, our trading, our education, these ideas, these figures, but how do we want to manifest it, and how do we feel like it manifests itself in the people? And like the first step in all this is seeing how we were able to work together, and that ideas that we believed in, and you know, we had sometimes our doubts about, but it resonated with other young Asians. And I would say like the work that we did to familiarize ourselves with Philly when you gave our group the neighborhood tour of 10th and Wolf in South Philly and helped us understand and a little bit more about Cambodian Americans in Southeast Asians in the city. It helped us so much, and we did many other things as part of our development of this event, trying to at least start to begin to understand Asian Americans, Asian communities in Philly. And there's so much more we still have to learn, but I think we started to build some of those relationships. But I do think it couldn't have come together without having an idea of what principled unity and the framework and the everything that we had learned about, even like maybe all these different figures, revolutionary social science, or ways to build relationships and get to know the people that we really started off with learning from you, Doc, and from the free school. And so that piece of it, of building relationships with different groups and communities in Philly as preparation for this event, I think helped us feel a lot closer to the people, but we obviously know that we have so much more to go. And I would count obviously the Nation of Islam as like one of the biggest, you know, and most impactful sort of relationships that we have built, that we still have so much to understand and so much to nurture there. Going into a very uncertain but also very exciting future. The Korean dancers and the Korean School of Southern New Jersey, another partnership, you know, that we've come to really appreciate. That they were on our side even after Nuri did a really great job, but these are hard topics, these are hard stands to take when we really step back, and everyone who gave their presentations, like, they really stepped up and you know, did a beautiful and incredible job, and it was just so special to even just witness this political process, speaking for myself. And maybe on this topic of culture, I wanted to bring in something that I've shared with our organizing committee, with the Bandung and Viet Lao Khmer groups, but I had come across this artist in the Philly Art Museum show last year, this summer. Her name is Jane Irish, and she's an older Quaker artist living and working in Philadelphia, and her paintings had been on trying to weave together histories of the Vietnam War, Vietnam War veterans protesting, and she's an incredible painter and someone who actually is so grounded in history as she inherited, and did some really deep research and investigation and interviews with Vietnam War veterans about the atrocities they themselves witnessed or committed, but then, you know, channeled into a stand against imperialism and war. And all of her paintings, for the most part, is grounded in that. And when I found this, like actually when I brought it up for the first time to Emily, she said, that'll be great for an event. And I at that time was like, what event? What's happening? Where are we gonna go with this? But in the process of developing our ideas, both the question of culture had always just remained at the front of our mind, just from the way Nuri and many others have talked about it, like culture and art is a way to channel these ideas, especially at a time when art and culture and ideas are so watered down or used as propaganda, and one of the front lines of how the war agenda makes itself digestible and easily taken up by the people. It makes them think that they can take a stand, but like not question what kind of stand it is. And so when the event, both times when our first scheduled event, and then when it was postponed, I reached out to this artist, just not knowing what kind of reception we would get. And I feel like this mirrors so many other relationships we were trying to build. Like we may not have known what was waiting in store in the Asian communities or the different partners or even the Nation of Islam. We didn't know so much about, but we were eager to bring something. And Jeremiah always, when we debriefed it, said that this event and being able to put together a program and the ideas we've worked on, we've been doing all of this because we think it's worthy of the people, and so we just wanted to see what kind of reception it can get. And I was really blown away by the fact that within 24 hours, both times I reached out, the artist Jane Irish had responded so eagerly and was so humble at a time when a lot of artists are not very humble when they receive so much accolade and from so many, from the public in terms of what they're able to achieve. And so she was able to attend for the full day. Well, at least she attended for the first half of the program and then watched the rest online. But the thing that she said even before the event started was that she was already really moved by what we were doing. And she had said that like when she had learned about the Vietnam War veterans sort of testimonies that helped really bring to light what was going on in Vietnam and what was going on in this war. It took place in small rooms with a few people giving their testimonies and speaking from the heart and taking these courageous stands. And she felt like that was happening at our event. She felt like she wanted to know so much more about the reading groups and for free school. And I know that there have been a lot of times when I've been very skeptical of artists and culture in this time, but Doc, you've also been very, and I take this also from Seraphine and many other people, it's like actually there is a role for culture to be on the right side in this moment, that there is a possibility of, I like when Seraphine, you say there's a possibility for a cultural revolution on our horizon if it's put towards the right ideas and framework for renewing this moment and figuring out where the people can, how they can make a choice or take a stand in this time. And so like her reflections had really helped me realize like there's that this event touched the lives of very many people, and it is like a peace conference that like so many different occupations and peoples have come together, and they're also eager for seeing what's to come or what else can grow out of this relationship with the free school and with our reading groups. And it's filled me with a lot of hope for what's to come, but also means that like we're still growing as young people who want to grow into this role. And our message, as Brandon said, is still developing, and we're still trying to polish and figure it out. And so I do feel like this was a really, really important stand and step forward for all in all.
Several people have mentioned this idea of the human family. I think in that discussion, I sort of want to rewind and go back to my direct family and essentially what I saw as my purpose in life growing up. I grew up in New York City, and it was in Chinatown. And I think the values that my family raised me with were essentially to get an education, not only for myself, but also for the betterment of my family, whether it's my mother, my grandmother, my father, etc. The thing that I started to realize as I was growing up and trying to protect my family is that I didn't know how to love them. And I think at that time I didn't quite understand why. But in coming to know free school and the lessons that we've learned, I have become a much better daughter, sister to my family members. And the reason why is because in the past I couldn't see the history and the civilization that produced the kinds of people that my family represented. The people who came from China and started their lives here, and the troubles that they faced or the obstacles that they faced in this country. But it was in coming to free school and in knowing the civil rights movement and the freedom struggle that I guess people have talked about that has connected many of us to our own histories as well, that I began to see my parents. And in doing so, I've also gained the strength to be able to love them. Not just them, but also the civilizations that we come from. And I say this story not because it's unique to myself, but also to a lot of the people in this room that I've grown with. Like, I've seen so many of us become better sons, better daughters, better sisters and better brothers because of this history, and this history of knowing the forces that have shaped them, what brought them here to America. And being, like, I think even as an example, when I first moved to Philadelphia, part of it, like, I was immediately thrown into planning the China conference. I think at first I didn't quite understand the significance of it, but really it is because of UDOC and also the many weeks that we spent discussing this history, but also pointing out the human struggle in it. That I actually saw a connection between myself and China and the people that I come from in the way that Emily had described earlier. And I think that's also the great gift that we've all received and are trying to share with other people as well, which is the ability to see human beings. Like, that sounds like something so simple, but growing up in the society, you're taught to revere like technology, or like things that are splashy and people that emerge out of nowhere, or are people that aren't connected to a sort of community or the people that shape them. And part of that makes us feel that people are so small and unable to change history. There's nothing we can do about it. But in learning this history and in learning the people who did change history, who led each other, or who learned from each other, it also teaches us how ordinary that is, and that we can seek to emulate ourselves after these people, after these histories. That history was changed by people at earlier periods of time, but it can also happen right now. Because sometimes it's so hard to believe that, like a room of what, like 30 people can change like billions of people, and what is prioritized, or what are the values, or what is the mission of people. And that's been the fundamental lesson for me in understanding history and understanding the role that we play moving forward. And a lot of it has come with such great like wonders, where in the past, I wasn't just unable to see my family members. I wasn't able to see the beauty in just people next to me. Growing up in Chinatown, like, I think that has been something that's been so valuable, but I couldn't understand it at that point. And now I'm going back home, or now having seen, like, learned and grown and going back home, I've been able to see, like, the grandmothers that are in the parks, the children that are running around, but also in Philadelphia as well. I think all of us have transformed to become people, to be able to see the deep pain and suffering of people, but also the deep strivings of people. And I think that's also why that, like, in seeing this truth, a lot of us, even if we want to run away, because the task sometimes seems so difficult, are unable to, because we've seen how beautiful people can be. And how it would be such a shame to not let that flourish. Because that's what's happening in this society. And that's also, I think, like returning to the human family piece, where now I'm able to see my younger cousins and understand why, as two young boys, or I mean, like just focusing on my two younger cousins, why they are so not confident. And without free school, I would have never been able to understand that. How young boys grow up in this society. But I think that's what we're trying to get at through, or what we were trying to get at with the event, which is that so many of us have received this gift, and this gift has given us so much dignity and pride, but also hope for the future. And our responsibility towards the future.
That's true.
And we just can't help to share that with other people. It's been such a blessing that you wonder, what would you do without that? Like, where would I be without, like, all my comrades that are here? And this sense of self, and I think An mentioned this during the presentation as well. Like, he stood up stronger, and he speaks with a greater voice.
Right.
I guess now I'm third in line.
Get in line.
Let's just, okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Oh yeah, all right, go ahead, bro.
Who was that?
Oh, Dom.
Oh, Don.
Go ahead, bro.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add to one of your points that you have given as well to the last speaker. Thank you. There was a quote, I believe, from the minister. He had said that the best of us is the worst of us, and the worst of us is the best of us. And my interpretation of that is the condition that our people are in isn't their fault. As you know, as you said, the condition that they're in is because of the system that we're in. And so, you know, continuing to learn from the nation, and then even coming here, I was very humbled with what's the word? With the I apologize. With the realization that I had that, you know, I'm sorry. With learning that I just lost. I'm so
Take your
sorry.
time, bro. Take your time.
What was I saying? Yeah. It was that just the system that we're brought under, and then our people are brought under, really puts us in a mindset countries and just pitting us against each other. So that's all I want to say. This is a great growing point for me, and I really want this to continue, and I really thank everybody for putting this together.
Brother Gregory says he's watching, says peace and blessings to everyone. And then two more comments, but Blaze shares that this finding beautiful commonality and unity between the civilizations of the world through our art and especially through music reminds me very much of discussions in our reading group about Paul Robeson and how he strived to do this as well, very much following in his footsteps. And I also wanted to share Manasvi Chaturvedi, who is a member of the Bandung group and moderated the first panel. She wanted to share her reflections. And she says, I think the event was very impactful for everyone in the audience. I think the organizing committee did such a great job structuring it, with each panel and presentation being exactly when it should have. I was really proud to see the young people I call my friends deliver such inspiring, proud presentations, each one speaking so honestly and tying history to the personal in a way that made everyone think critically about themselves and the world they live in. I think that the impact of the event could be seen in the audience, who even after a long day seemed not tired but invigorated. And that's it.
That's really true.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to say something. I thought it was a perfect conference, and I was just amazed at how well it was organized down to every detail. And of course, at the end, the cultural presentations were spectacular. I mean, where would you see that? And it was just an amazing thing, and to have witnessed the coming together of all of these diverse people, and the diversity was greater than we are even knowing to this point. I think there was a greater diversity there, and of course, the conference and you all, the organizers, being acknowledged by the Nation of Islam. That is, and as you all have said, as Brandon points out, this is not a fly-by-night organization.
Not at all.
And this is an organization, and I can speak for myself, I can certainly speak for my colleague Dwight Murph when we were at Lincoln. There were always two brothers from the Nation of Islam who every week brought the Muhammad Speaks newspaper to us. And Brandon Doe is completely correct. That newspaper educated us about the world. And it not only reported on Korea and Vietnam and the African movements in Cuba, but it presented them as great heroic figures. And I learned to respect and to be inspired by the Vietnamese resistance. And I can readily understand Chanda and Brandon's embrace of the Nation of Islam. It's a powerful organization that has withstood every kind of assault and attack upon its integrity, upon its members, that one can imagine. And you're right about Minister Louis Farrakhan. For him to still be standing after what he has gone through, it is a testament in heroism. And you're right, Brandon. Why is he not taught? Why is this organization not studied? but it is studied, and there are books. I've mentioned them to Brandon and Chandra, and perhaps the Free School will have to probe more deeply into this history. And knowing all of the brothers and sisters from the Nation of Islam who were at the event, I know that they don't just come to anything. They don't. I know Michael Zed Muhammad, I know Jerome, I know Gregory not as well. These are very, very serious people. But it's a testament. It's just like in the China conference when you all reached out to Lily Yi, the great artist, and of course the Diocese of the Episcopal Church here in Pennsylvania. They're embracing the China conference, and this is the good news. Like Chanda said, we realize that we are fighting alongside of many, many other people, in fact, humanity itself. And once that is realized, you are able to fight better, you fight with better confidence, and so on. I just want to say one thing, I guess, to give an example. Emily and Alice took me to an Aretha Franklin tribute last night, which was quite amazing. I didn't really understand who had organized, what was inspiring this, because I knew there was a heavy church gospel influence in it, but I could not really identify it until one of the members of a very, very famous gospel group called the Clark Sisters sang at the end. And I knew then that this event was organized by people coming out of the gospel church. When I say the gospel or sanctified church, we're talking about that part of black religious life where the singing is the message, the ministry. And so, we are so accustomed to the great black singers and artists. But I think what everybody knows that is a part of this movement, this church movement, the best singers are in the church. And they are not known outside of the church, the gospel movement. Gospel is probably the strongest movement of music in the African American community. Now, that's saying a lot, and the great Aretha Franklin would even have acknowledged that and did acknowledge it, that as much as she had achieved, that her greatest achievement was, well, first of all, the album Amazing Grace, and that her greatest music was gospel. Isn't that interesting? So we were there, and I, because usually when I go somewhere, I find, I know people, hey, how you doing, and that type of thing. I didn't know anybody. And I didn't know anybody because I'm not in the gospel church. And I don't say that, to be prideful. I'm just not there. But this movement is such a powerful part of the black movement. And everybody is so absolutely right. Be it through the Nation of Islam, be it through the Episcopal Diocese, there is magic in the black community. There's something magical here. And how it will manifest going forward is very difficult to predict. But there's something deep, something very, very profound. And there is no contradiction between what we call the sanctified and gospel church and the Nation of Islam. There's no big argument between them over Islam versus black Christianity. The great question is how to save our people from the catastrophe of capitalism and war. And whether it's done through song, whether it's done through teaching, whether it's done whatever, that is uppermost on the agenda of the black movement. It's uppermost. And we who claim a belief in peace and humanity must, I mean, it's almost something you can't avoid, must be anchored to this great movement of black people, which does not deny anybody else.
Nope, it doesn't.
And I agree with Alice. You understand yourself better in this country by understanding this black movement, and vice versa, believe me. We black folk understand ourselves better in understanding the great histories. Cambodia, China, you know, Vietnam. We really do. We have become better. And part of the whole thing is that the black movement has always reached out. Except when you get to the thing of the black misleadership class, and they want to keep everything within the confines of the white ruling class of the United States who are paying them off. But I just want to end on this. I was sitting on the front row the whole time because I didn't want to miss anything. And I was trying to figure out, and I wish you all would say more about this, how you did it, how you conceptualized it. You know, because, you know, on one side it's Korea and Vietnam, two nations that have fought the United States military. That is not a small thing. Now, two nations, one to complete victory, Vietnam, and the other to a yet complete victory, Korea, which is partitioned by the United States. The separation of the Korean people by the United States. And then they have the nerve to say to the Vietnamese, or to the Korean people in particular, that this is normal. That it is normal to divide Korea, this ancient civilization. This ancient, I think the Korean civilization is older than Chinese civilization. I think so. It is not. See, a lot of people say Korea is derivative from China. Japan is more derivative from China. Korea. Yeah, I mean, this is, well, we're into the area of historical dispute. Not quite the 1619 project, but no, I think I think there are many Korean historians, probably in North Korea, who would make the argument that Korean civilization is at least as old as China and maybe older. It is not a derivative civilization. It arises from its own foundation. You could make the same argument of Vietnam and Cambodia, that they are older because civilization did not come from Northeast Asia down, it came from Southeast Asia up. I mean, so I think, Chanda, in your documentaries, and I like to I'd like you to keep me abreast of your findings. But we will find that Cambodian civilization is one of the oldest. That humanity populated Asia from the south. And the out of Africa movement was through the islands of the South, what we call South China and Indonesia, and into Vietnam. Human beings sailed from Africa to Southeast Asia and back and forth. So, you know, this idea that the white world is justified in waging war and partitioning. Hello, Brother Jerome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, what's up? What up? What up?
Yeah. It's my old head. You're a little late, brother. But anyway, we'll talk about this later. We've been together for so many years. But I just want to make that point clear. This idea of having people from ancient civilizations in the United States be ashamed of themselves and feel that their only path is as individuals cut off from their history and to assimilate into white culture, whatever that might be. This is criminal, honestly. And I can understand just what Alice is saying. It is a very emotional thing. I could not really be a loving child to my parents or loving sibling because I did not love myself, and I was being taught not to love myself. And I heard with Brandon Doe, that beautiful presentation you had, what the refugee camps did, and you comparing them to concentration camps. I mean, you know, come on, where the brainwashing and all the bad and terrible things that happened in Vietnam before, and then to continue it here, to make proud people, ancient people, hate themselves. So I just think that what we're doing is returning to what is normal, reclaiming. And what you all did, you just can't, how do you put a value on something like you can't. In this kind of crisis, to reclaim the anti-colonial struggle in two of the nations that fought the U.S. military and defeated them and are building new societies, and then to connect that. And honestly, sometimes I feel, I ask myself, and me and Serafina talk about this, have we as a people, we African Americans, have we given our best? Are we an exhausted people? Do we have the strength and the capacity to do it again? And I'm still uncertain. We gave a lot, and we've taken a lot of hits, a lot of setbacks. We really have. And I think that you all, the free school, let me just tell you, I just want to say this. One of the things that we're criticized for, and it's a bad faith criticism, it's a disingenuous criticism, it's a criticism of the enemies of black liberation.
Right.
Who say that, well, the free school is made up of Asians and blacks. And I struggled with this. you know, I struggle with it because I want black folk to understand what we're doing. You understand what I'm saying? I want black folk to understand us because what we're doing is in the interest of black liberation. And I take it personally when people will, you know, attack us and smear us in that way.
Right.
But what has become clear to me is that it is the principled unity that counts. You all do not know, and I don't think you have the experience to fully evaluate what you are doing. And I guess it's a biblical thing. It's by your work you shall be known.
Yes.
Yep.
Amen.
And your work is noble, it's honest, and you all don't hold back. You give it all to the cause of freedom. And that's what is so inspiring. In a time where young people are not supposed to be like you all, supposed to be self-centered. You're not supposed to be interested in the great Aretha Franklin or, you know, this great music, or Muhammad Ali, or the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You know, you're not supposed, and you all are normalizing principled unity in the struggle for freedom. And I can only express my deep appreciation and humility. I'm just humbled by you. I mean, I ain't making this up. You all humble me. And I want to be a better person because of you all. Your kindness, your generosity, your decency, you know, and I wish more people would open their hearts up to what we're doing. They would be better people. Our struggle here would be more advanced. And just my last point, the spirit of trust. I know what you give to me. You keep talking about me. What I receive is nothing compared, what I give is nothing compared to what I receive from you all. The kindest, most generous, most dedicated people are in this Saturday Free School. So that's... Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to echo a lot of what you said. I just want to say everyone who's taken part in this event should be extremely proud in what they've done, what they continue to do. You know, the question comes up of where are our heroes? What you all are doing is extremely brave. And the life that you're deciding to lead is heroic. You know, though you can get up and speak the way you spoke, and you can give your whole heart. I mean, it's a strength, you know. Coming from my own life, you know, I was always had difficult crying or being that vulnerable, just as a man. Like, you're told not to do that. You're not told to really expose yourself in that way. And that's a deep failing of weakness I have to overcome with. But to see everyone give as much as they've given, it really fills me with a spirit of hope and strength. And really the spirit of that event, just from an observer view, I could feel the spirit of the child. That's something that's so, of the child, of the children.
Yes.
You know, I was unfortunately, I had to leave earlier than I would have liked. Emily was fortunate to send me the videos of the children who were dancing and drumming. And I got choked up of the women, the little girls dancing with the flowers. I mean, it's the little girls dancing. What's so profound about it, but I could just sense the dignity they had in their spirit to be able to come to this space and show this beautiful gift that they had. And I was wondering, what is going to happen to those kids if they can't retain that moral grounding, if they don't continue to work that idea, if that's taken from them. And yeah, I think of my own life. I mean, I'm a white American, but I was raised in a very communist family. And it's a funny thing to say, but that's deeply what my parents believed and tried to teach me, and I held on to it for as long as I could, but all of the people around me, all my friends that I went to school with and others really taught me in one way or another to be ashamed of that. And ultimately I let go of it. And as upsetting as it is to admit that, I really feel like when I walked into that building and I saw on the wall the James Baldwin, every bombed village is my hometown. I felt home. I felt like I can just be myself. I don't have to be worried about how people are going to judge me for the truth, for what we're struggling for. So I really thank you all for what you do, and I'm blessed to know you all.
I just want to add that I think for people who didn't really know who we were coming into the event, and they were like, who are these people? Like, who are these young people? Like, why are they doing this event? Like, what's the agenda? I think that is a question that people ask, because it was we really did our best to organize the event well, first of all, but also it was very clear that each person spoke with their own, as Xiao Yin said in her reflection, with their own convictions and their own way of understanding, and with their own original formulations of things. And I was actually talking with my mom, who had watched the event online, and she asked that question. She was like, the question that I have, one of the questions I have is like, yeah, what is like the purpose behind all of this? And it's a very valid question, and I think my first response is, our agenda is peace, and we want a more beautiful country. Just like very simple stuff like that. And maybe people may not believe us, but as you're saying, your actions prove your faith, or
You will be known
by your
work.
works.
Yeah.
And
That's true.
And I think, I think that was one of the first things that I guess I wanted to reflect on, but also I also just want to continue to show gratitude and to just give a shout out to everyone who organized, especially because of this question of how did we do this event. A lot of it was the meeting together every week, week in, week out, constantly. Also, part of the process is also it's not like anyone gave us a guide, for how to do this, and we had to find everything. People like Wilfred Burchett really helped out in Whittington, and that was actually where Wilfred Burchett, in his hugely important coverage of the Korean War in North Korea, he was the one who first allowed us to see this fact, or this truth of Korea's history, which is that the Korean War was not really what you would think of as a civil war, but it was a people's war against imperialism. And that's huge, because as a diaspora Korean, you are taught to be ashamed of this history, this notion that our people turned on each other. I think as Odom was saying, and to instead view it from the light, which is that, Burchett and Whittington witnessed, every morning, the countryside of Korea boils with life, the people who are rebuilding the bridges and the railroads that have been bombed by the U.S., pounded into, these cities that have been pounded into dust, and I think that was also, that formulation which I think really Burchett clarified for us. I think that was also what informed, I think, Doe's presentation and what's so moving for all of us. And I think, yeah, I really do think that all of us were transformed through the process of preparing for this event, of doing especially also the outreach as well. I know that, like, I was personally very scared of, like, yeah, how are people going to respond? Like, are we just going to be, like, rejected outright? And, you know, I think it took, yeah, like, even for individuals, it took a lot of courage to, you know, like, Doe reaching out to Pastor Lee, Brandon building that relationship between us and the Nation of Islam and bringing us to the mosque. As Kathy mentioned, Honda led us on a tour of her neighborhood in South Philly. And it was, I don't know, I wish everyone could have come to that because Chanda did so much research for that tour.
Because I didn't know anything.
Well,
I
mean,
was filled with anxiety. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, but you sounded like an expert. And I still remember one of the things that you had found in your research was there's that Buddhist temple in your neighborhood. And I think you said, like, after that temple was established, like, violence and crime in that area was reduced, like, statistically, as a result of the presence of that temple.
Yeah.
And, you know, we visited, like, a Korean Buddhist monk in North Philly who I think Derek knows. And then Nuri had to translate all of it because he didn't speak English, even though he's been here since the 90s. You know, and so it was a lot of just reaching out, seeing who was there, how people would respond to our message, just trying to have, you know, conversations with people. And in that respect, I think we are really following in the footsteps of the free school, of all of these efforts, of all of the past events, all of these, you know, efforts to, like, reach out to the community and to see who will respond to our message. And it was knowing that, you know, that training and that example, as well as being filled with, you know, like, when you actually are filled with this sense of pride or dignity, and a sense of wanting to do right by history, you know, it's like, yeah, what should you be afraid of? Like, why should you be afraid of anything?
That's right. That's right.
And so I think that was really part of, I think, what motivated us, and also what allowed us to, I think, bring the event together, to bring in so many different kinds of people, including people that we'd never met before, but especially those relationships, and just, like, reaching out to people, trying to just, like, talk, and find where our common ground is, because that's so important. Yeah.
Go ahead,
I just
Meg.
had one more.
Oh.
I just want to emphasize from what Jeremiah's saying that, like, you, Doc, you taught us to be brave. You really did. And actually, like, we, like, at least for the Bandung group, the only reason why we started looking into journalists was because we had the model of the China event. Was because you were the one who taught us to say, like, look for everything you can. The history is going to be hidden from you.
Wow.
You know, look at these journalists. Like, I remember the China event. You were such a voracious reader. You were the one who was like, it doesn't matter if it's a white journalist. See what they have to say.
Yeah.
Read as much as you can.
Yes.
And a lot of things I don't think we even realized we got from you. And also the discipline of meeting every week, we got it from our OG Dr. Montero. He doesn't skip a week. No.
We didn't skip a week. We did.
Okay, we skipped 4 weeks after.
Yeah, we did.
No, yeah, and also you're the one who taught us Baldwin. You told us when Baldwin says you have to earn your death.
Yep, that's right.
And you taught us that.
Okay.
Anyways, Megan's going now.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to say, I think the history of Korea, I knew a little bit about Vietnam. I mean, there was such an incredible movement for the freedom of Vietnam. I really didn't know about Korea. I think that was part of Doe's presentation because he was saying things that have not been said in public in this country. And maybe it's known to the Nation of Islam through Muhammad Speaks, but I think, like, people, it's not said that they killed 4,000 people. I mean, that...
No, 4 million.
4 million, but in his presentation he was talking about, like, as an example, just dropping a bomb. 4,000 people gone. I mean, and that's a part of South Korea, what South Korea is, because they're living knowing that this happened. And this is really what the collapse of the West means, is all this truth is going to come out. There's going to be a reckoning. And I also think that's a reason why Nation of Islam is so important, because they really do envision a world beyond the West and the white world order. And like how to just, I mean, you don't have to live in the shadow of that. You can be, you know, who you're meant to be. And I think that was a really important part of Brother Gregory's presentation on violence. And everybody, we're all, you know, everybody was trying to get at it, you know, Pastor Lee approached in his own way. But what he said is, you know, if I knew myself, I never would have done what I did. And that's the thing, they rob you of your sense of self. And I really think that's a part of this moment. People have to rediscover who they are so they can envision a different future. But I think definitely the history of Korea has to be continued to be, I mean, all of these histories, but I think especially Korea, because that's, I mean, that's part of the moment, you know, with this potential for reunification. Yeah.
Can I? Go ahead. Wait a minute, hold it. Chimbarta.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, you know, I think walking into the event, one of the first things that people from the outside felt was a deep sense of humility on behalf of, you know, everyone present there, and especially as you got through the event, I think, you know, the things that shone out were like, you know, immense reason for people to be extremely proud for being able to do what they were doing. And, you know, this brought me to the question of, you know, I think, and, you know, this is also to do with, like, you know, other things that we have been reading in regard to the Indian struggle too, about, you know, this attempt of, you know, what we are trying to do. I think the understanding of a purpose behind what we are doing really shapes the way that things are done. And I think the planning of the event, like, like, you know, what you were saying, Dr. Last, it was extremely well planned. You know, given the constitution of each panel, like, I mean, I can't stop thinking about the you know, the second panel, which had Pastor Lee and, you know, Brother Muhammad. I mean, I was trying to take some notes, but it was very hard to. The only notes I had, you know, during Brother Muhammad's talk was, you know, he was talking about a violent non-violence. That's what I could think of, you know, when he was talking in, I mean, he really got to the bottom of, you know, why the Nation of Islam stood the test of time for being such an important institution for the people. And I think in the planning of the event, like the fact that the cultural you know, program was entirely with children, I think that said a lot about, you know, why we are trying to do this. This is really about, you know, the future that is coming, and it's symbolized only by children. And and I think, like, you know, the thing I was trying to talk about before about, you know, what we do in terms of, you know, what we try to uncover as truth and the purpose behind our doing it. I think there is a deep relationship to investigate it between that, because truth is not simply a record or a collection of facts. There have been immense amounts of, you know, research and talks to no end regarding all the surrounding wars in Asia. But I mean, all of it, I think, means nothing unless you talk about why you are doing it.
Yes, sir.
And I think it came out from, you know, everyone's talks at the discussion that there is a deep sense of, you know, personal and like, you know, personal liberation and liberation of, you know, the entire humanity. And you can't make sense of all the history without knowing your role in it. And I think all the speakers had, you know, had that to the ground. So it was a really humbling experience for everyone.
Let me let Brother Jerome come in, and then Alice, and then Sophia.
I didn't really have much to say. I really appreciated last week. It was just a phenomenal event. I was really blown away by everyone's presentation, and you know, like Gregory. Oh, I got to raise my voice. I'm not used to raising my voice, you know, which is a lie.
We go way back.
I don't know if I did meet you in Muhammad Speaks, but there was I don't know if that was 68 or 7 or 6, or I saw Tony in the pages of the Muhammad Speaks being arrested. By the, I don't know if you were taken into custody by the Philadelphia Police Department, or was that the Chicago?
That was the Philadelphia Police with the FBI.
Yeah, after you left Chicago, because Tony had told me that how that happened was he was sitting in mosque number 2 in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his cousin came to him and says that the police were wanting they were seeking your presence. So, but that's, I mean, you can, I actually have the actual article to that online. Maybe I'll post it, so you can see it.
Oh, I kind of delete a lot of that from my resume.
But somebody said Korea, and I came in the nation as a high school student in '68. And my mentor, one of my mentors in the nation, because I was, very young, and there wasn't a lot of young people in the local mosque then, but he's my namesake, Jerome. He's a bus driver, and this is FOI. His wife was Korean, and she was in MGT. She joined the nation.
Tell them what the MGT is.
Muslim Girls Training. It's actually MGT, GCC. Muslim Girls Training and General Civilization Class, which all the women in the nation have that title. And it's really, their relationship to God, because that's who they aspire to be like. The minister said recently at the Savior's Day speech that, women were the second self of God. And that's what they attain to, and they don't necessarily put their faith in men, they put their faith in a higher being. And if the man goes in accordance with that, then of course there's a relationship that, as comes out of that. But the other thing I wanted to say was the Muhammad Speaks, the origin of it, one of the founders he was either Indian or Pakistani. He was a journalist. Pakistani, my bad. So there's all these different ethnic and racial groups were all involved in the nation's origin. Then Farad Muhammad was born in the Middle East. So you have all these various groups that were a part of and many of them were Asian, who were part of the origin story of the nation, and then its development of this business enterprise that came out of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The largest exporter or importer of frozen fish in America was the Nation of Islam, and they were importing fish from Argentina. I got that right. So the nation has these relationships all over the world. I actually met I was in Libya, I was in Tripoli, and somebody introduced me to the person who arranged, and I forget what year that was, 68 or 69, for a loan from Gaddafi of $4 or $5 million to Elijah Muhammad. And somebody introduced me to the person who arranged the loan. So, and I've met these people all over the world. I've traveled a lot in Africa, who had these relationships that I didn't know anything about until people introduced me. And they found I was a follower of Elijah Muhammad, and then they introduced me to people who had these relationships with him. And many of them were Asian, and many of them were, of course, African, but that's kind of, I only wanted to mention the sister who was in Philly that was married to the brother who, named Jerome, and his wife's name. His wife was Korean, but I kept talking.
That's okay. Let me just say, Dwight, would you like to say something? You were there.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that I talk to Tony all the time, and I explained to him about how he's doing a wonderful job here. But, and I think that, like everybody's saying, I'm repeating myself, it was a great conference. But what's interesting is the consciousness that you are developing here. in philosophy, the philosopher named white ignorance, black ignorance, whatever you want to talk, how you want to put it. But your story and your story, there are a lot of people who don't know their history, and once you learn your history, it sort of changes your consciousness. It's the same thing, for example, let me explain. For example, you take a young kid, a black kid, who was born in the year 2002. He has a whole different perception of how he relates to the world unless he begins to understand how he got here. He'll have different relationships with Asians and other groups. So there's a whole lot of people outside who don't know what you guys are talking about. And so that idea of education and what Tony is doing here about talking about these things, it raises your consciousness, and it does make for a better world. Because what you're doing is criticizing the status quo. And when you say truth, there are a bunch of lies. In fact, one of the things that throughout history, why black people have suffered is because of white ignorance. When you have white people who are at the top making decisions out of ignorance, it affects our lives, you see. And so you guys are doing, I'm going to finish, but you guys are doing a good job by talking about these issues and also being critical. And also, and keeping in mind that you also must be constantly criticizing each other so you can at least understand, because you don't want to get like a religion. You don't want that, because that always destroys any group. But I'm talking as a philosopher. The good thing about philosophy is that it's always searching for something, criticizing, searching for something, and that is what I found good about coming here. Because the reason why I came today, because I wanted to hear, I had something else to do, really. But you make a choice. You make a choice.
That's right.
And when you make a choice, you choose what you think is more valuable. So I came, and I came when you were speaking, and I was, very impressed about what you had to say. And like I said, the growth in consciousness is very important. Reading and being critical. And I praise you for that. And I praise you for that, too, after being fired from Temple. And I want to say that, and though confidence is very important, and yes, even at Temple University, they need to bring them back. They need to be, have a more have a more. But what he's telling you about the black community, he's giving you some insights, and listen to him, and I'll come and disagree with him if I think he's wrong.
Serafina, did you have your?
Alice had one and then me.
Okay, Alice.
I was just going to say, during the event, Brother Gregory Muhammad had said, be yourself. You don't need to be white to make it.
Yeah.
And I think those two parts of that sentence were essentially what we were trying to address through the event. We were trying to understand our history and what was, to understand what is and who we are and who we can be. And then I think the other piece is that you don't need to be white to be able to make it. I think we were giving a sense of the Korean people and the Vietnamese people, but also African Americans in America, or African Americans, to give a sense of not only the sacrifices that were made, but also the incredible achievements that came out of it as well. Whether it was this peace or democracy that was being built, or the culture that came out of it, those are great achievements that when you know them, it isn't that scary actually to not be white. And it also, like, I think going to the Aretha Franklin concert was also like a moment of, like a moment for me as well, where I was watching those performers, and we were watching those performers sing Aretha Franklin's song, and I was so blown away at like the soul, like the immense human emotion and soul that the singers were able to bring, the like impressive technicality, and like Doc was talking to us like through like how they were going through different chords, or like even before the concert, and how much talent there was. And that moment was also representative for me of like, there is an alternative, and the alternative is not lesser than. Like that alternative actually is something that you're like, actually, like this thing that we have is terrible, and there is this other like tradition and vision that actually should give us pride and strength to pursue instead. And I think it also goes to like this thing that we all like was instilled in me during the China conference as well, where it was very hard to talk about China, especially in the midst of like U.S. and China relations. But a theme that was brought out is the human struggle, but also the other piece of like, it is never a deficit to stand up for what's right.
That's right.
And that was something that was constantly iterated in the conversations we were having weekly in free school. And also in like personal conversations where, you know, like there's the story of how Emily was like nervous about the conference, and then Doc would like try to assuage her. And like throughout the many meetings, he would consistently say, like, it is never a deficit. And I think that's also true like throughout the event as well, where for many of us, at the beginning it seemed like it would be hard to talk about North Korea or to talk about Vietnam. But in that process, actually I could see that fear going away for a lot of people. And instead, what came forward was the strength and was like the gems that we were able to discover in that process. And that's why I think many of us were able to stand up forward and speak even if we weren't great. Like, haven't been trained in like speaking or haven't spoken as much. But yeah, that was my part.
Let me call on Anna.
I mean, I guess even though like I didn't speak, I guess one huge thing that I really got from all of this is this idea of redemption. Like, I mean, first of all, on a personal level, like I just feel so indebted to the free school and to this tradition, because I mean, I think like just about everyone else, and I mean, especially all the young people in this room, like I went through life just constantly feeling like insecure and the need to prove myself, and like trying to measure up against like this impossible, inhuman, like white standard. And I think especially so with me because like, you know, like like being mixed, I felt like insecure, and I always wanted to, like I knew that I wanted to like be or do something beyond, you know, what society expected. And like, you know, I wanted to. Well, I'm mixed Korean and white, and you know, like I always felt that like, you know, like the Koreanness was presented to me in a very narrow sense, I think both by like my family, but also by this country. But it really wasn't until like I found, or maybe this tradition found me, that
It'd be like that.
that, you know, it wasn't like until like I found the Black tradition that I felt I was actually able to see myself like as Asian and as inheriting, you know, like this great civilization. I never thought that I could be redeemed like that. So there's that, you know, I never thought that I really had anything to give, or that if I did, you know, it would just be something like insignificant, you know, like unimportant after I die. But, you know, yeah, But I guess, and I think like that was one of the things that like really like made sense to me about like the Nation of Islam is just like when I was hearing Brother Gregory Muhammad talk, this, you know, all of this like propaganda that like we've all been hit with about the nation, but really what I got was, you know, like redemption, like the fact that like as humans, like we are inherently redeemable and we all deserve to be redeemed. You know, that it gave him dignity and redemption. Yeah, and I think also like as to what Emily was saying earlier, like when she mentioned like that in the Vietnamese constitution, like that they referenced like the American Revolution, you know, and that like how people in this country don't even want to come to terms and recognize our own revolution. How can we like redeem our own history? How can we really like redeem our own society? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I can't like tie it all together super coherently, but it's just something that I had been thinking a lot about, and something that this event I think really drove home the importance and like the really like essential human quality of redemption, and about how like it's so needed to move everything forward.
Could you just explain what you mean by redemption?
What do I mean by redemption? I mean, I can't give like a good dictionary definition, but I guess I mean like in the sense of being given another chance, you know, like renewal.
It's an atonement.
Yeah.
It's an atonement.
And I think a big part of it is also forgiveness. That, you know, despite like the choices that we might have made, that like there's always a chance then that we all deserve a chance to make things right and to move things forward. Because I mean, if not for that, then like what is the purpose of living? And how is it that this country, you know, denies that? I mean, it almost seems like the ruling class and like its systems are built on this idea or this principle of denying people chances to really flourish and prove, you know, themselves not by a white standard, but like to prove and to show like their humanity, what they can contribute.
Wow. Let me just see if Emily, are there any people on the chat?
Maybe Odd had something.
On says,
Speak up a little bit too.
organizing this recent event has made firm our incredible responsibility to this society. From the responses I've been receiving from people or the conversations I've been having at the workplace or with my neighbors, far from being fatigued, I've just been continually invigorated since last week. This liberatory history, standing for the truth, is nourishing like nothing else I've ever experienced. Cannot be more thankful for my fellow organizers for being the ground beneath my feet. It is all of you that have helped me to stand tall. And that's the comment.
Okay. Serafina?
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean that. It's interesting that you say that, the thing about redemption, because I was just thinking about, you know, Doc, what you said, you know, which ways, or if Black people can do it again, that kind of thing. Also, in considering the 10th anniversary, because we've been talking about it a bit, but I did want to share, just in that point that you made, kind of like, you know, what we were thinking about was how in a church, you know, that's kind of hardly been used, and maybe is now even coming to a place where it's more invigorated with its concerts and programs and things that it wants to do for the rest of the year. The free schools stood on principle throughout all this time, for the past 10 years. And it's holding on to all of which you guys are saying. The history, the that are learned from the world peace movement. And I guess another thought that I was having was how interesting now, in a time of such moral isolation of the American people, that we need the rest of the world who is in a position that can stand for their own civilizations and have the West is as a less importance. There's a less importance of the dominance of the West today. What does that mean for the rest of the world in terms of their own, own not only sense of selves, but being able to develop their own societies? The thing about money, trade, where will Africa be in this trajectory? And I was just I have thoughts that, because a friend of mine wanted to start a choir, and I'm going to probably be part of a choir, but I was telling Doc that, and even to what you're saying about the concept about Aretha, the importance of having a song. It just is a feeling, it's a similar feeling that I was trying to express when we were talking about the Ukraine situation, and I was trying to say, or gauge the temperature of just people here, Mamie and Vincent. I was trying to talk about it and stuff like that, and it didn't seem, though everything is getting worse, like how can things get even more worse? But then there's the irony, like, okay, the things are bad, but we're still here. There's a feeling in between the two that I can't really quite say, but it's like okay, I want to add that to what Doc was also saying at the Black Agenda kind of conversation, when he was saying that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just interesting, though, that the level of consciousness in the American people, in some ways, which aren't always, are being is hard to articulate. Though on the other hand, people do stand for peace. People realize the lies of the Biden administration. People know that they're being robbed of their own sense of selves, education. I know it. And even though there's not ability to articulate all the things that are kind of going on, and the confusion that really it makes, it doesn't feel like it's a wall that can't be gone over. You know what I'm saying? Which is, yeah. No, but it's not like, see, what I'm saying is this. The cards are still in our favor. We still got hands to deal. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's like the free school is a organism, apparatus, whatever you want to call it, that makes it possible to be able to deal that hand. But I also think that how do we gauge which way Black people are going to go? What we do know is that the rest of the world will be able to hold on to the American people and the will towards democracy that I do believe the American people want.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
But it's just interesting.
Yeah.
We have this conference. We have all of these people, everyone here, who I'm so grateful to know, who are from everywhere. And the people around in this neighborhood don't know you guys, but they don't, it's not like a situation, even though that could be a process in of itself. To get to know each other, we have to know, whatever that will come, whatever. The point is that you guys are standing for the people who are here.
That's right.
Who are here every day, either cracked out or up in, the worst situations, but you're standing for them. And that's why I still do believe that there's a different feeling. There's a different feeling. Or maybe that's because I'm in the free school and I am always, like, I'm always like,
Optimistic.
no, it's not optimistic. I just know that what we're saying is true. I know what we're saying is right. And I believe that even though I could die and like technically I wouldn't see the outcome of what we've been doing, I know we've laid a foundation for what is to come. And I know that we are doing the work that is important. What you said, I don't even know how to say that quote again, but what you said was true.
By their works you shall know them.
Yeah.
That's
It's the same thing as this mural. It doesn't have to be seen, but it has to be there.
People see it.
It has to be there. It's the same thing with that Buddhist temple. It has to be there. It doesn't even matter if it wasn't from the 5th century, nothing like that. Well, it came from there. Okay, so you have to know about it. But I think the free school holds on to something that deep, and I think that's why there's different temperature in this city. But that's why I wanted to add to what you guys were saying. Like you, I can't do it.
I want to ask Kayla, would you have something to say?
Not at the moment, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. What is your name
My
again?
name is Lloyd. I came to the event. It was really, really awesome. I'm gonna try to find the right words. I drank a little bit of coffee, so I'm kind of like jittery. But I was very impressed and refreshed by. It might seem like very simple, but a lot of people who do claim to be activists and like doing good work for other people will isolate these conversations and make it so that like people believe that Asians shouldn't be trying to find correlations between their experiences that like between the experiences of like Black Americans and their experiences in America. I kind of like have it in my mind that information is like redlined in the same way that neighborhoods were redlined, and like you guys do the work of going out and actually learning and making these parallels and making this information available to people. And I like the word world house phrase that you use, like making that like a reality, because I do see a lot of ideas like perpetuated that Asian Americans shouldn't be trying to find parallels or claim anything in the Black experience for themselves, but it's very much like I don't really know the word, but there are parallels in our experiences, and we should look externally outside of America and see how America takes our identity from us, So I appreciate you guys throwing the event, and I was really happy to be here. And I really come here and like speak for you guys. I don't want to intrude. You guys are like talking about your event and talking about all the work that you've put in to get to this point. But it's really inspiring to be here, and you guys sound like James Cone. Like you guys are using all this. You're talking about redemption, all these like religious terms, but for like a worldly mission. I'm kind of jittery right now.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Alicia, you want to say? Go ahead. Okay, she's very quiet. Well, if not, maybe it's 1 o'clock and yeah, 1:15.
Wait, can we talk until the sign-in paper gets?
Oh yeah, we're sending the sign-in sheet is being passed around. Just quickly, we cannot not comment upon the situation in the world, the war, peace situation. And in fact, that was, the world is a great motivator for the conference, the anti-colonial struggle, the anti-militarism struggle, and of course, the great speech by Martin Luther King Jr., which no matter how many times you listen to it, it's like you're just hearing it for the first time. But as I think everyone is aware, that the struggle in Ukraine continues. The American people, as everyone has pointed out, once again, are being inundated with propaganda and lies that make everything the opposite. The war makers are made out to be the peacemakers.
Right.
And those who are really defending themselves against the war makers are made out to be war makers. And I know we don't have time today, although we've done it in the past, go through many of the details of what led to this. In fact, I think this was a war that the Biden administration wanted very, very badly. And if you think about the way they're playing this, you can see why they wanted to create a world crisis of this type, so as, one, to take the focus off of their domestic problems and to raise Joe Biden up as a defender of democracy and so on. The other thing is, and this is, it's like, I don't know how they could assume a lot of this would work out the way they wanted it to. For example, they have imposed unbelievable sanctions on Russia. No major country has ever been sanctioned like this. They have gone so far as to impose sanctions on Russia that might hurt and probably will hurt the West.
Right.
I mean, it's which makes it seem even more desperate.
True that.
You know what I'm saying? In other words, they're prepared, well, at least the American elite are prepared to do irreversible damage to Europe to get their way. But the American people will not escape the spin-off of this. The other thing that does not make a lot of sense is, why did they believe that the Asian and African nations would just easily join in an American coalition for democracy and against Russia? And what made them think, and this is really ludicrous, hey Lloyd, just dig where I'm going with this. Why did they think that India would so easily bend to American wishes? Now, India has given up a lot, I feel, in terms of its national interest and standing over the last couple of years, and we could go into that. But why did they think that India would abandon Russia? You see what I'm saying? India had entered into a thing called the Quad, which was really an anti-China coalition, where it didn't seem like India should have been there in the first place. It's like me or Derek going and being up in a Ku Klux Klan meeting. You know, here's Modi sitting up there. Modi is the Prime Minister of India. But Russia, for India, is a very different question than China. And they have tried to play India in a way that would so diminish India's self-respect and respect in the world that they've literally pushed India not only closer to Russia, but closer to China. And of course, they're trying to maneuver diplomatically at the United Nations, and all of this is PR, by the way. We'll come back to that. But in so doing, they've created an alliance of Asian and African and Latin American countries that we've never seen before. They constantly talk about 141 nations voted for the U.S. resolution to condemn Russia in Ukraine. But they did not mention that the 50 nations that abstained or voted against the U.S. resolution in terms of population constitute the majority of the world's population. Anytime India and China are voting together, all right, you got 3 billion people right there, you know, right out the gate.
What does that say about democracy?
Say that again?
What does that say about democracy?
Yeah. So, diplomatically, they have failed. And let me just say this, it's quite easy in the UN General Assembly, where you got a lot of very small and weak nations, economically and otherwise, to bully them into voting for resolution. 27 countries did not even participate in the vote. Among them were 7 African nations. But of the nations that voted with China and India and Pakistan, 26, I think 26, no, 30-something were African nations. To put it another way, and Africa is a severely partitioned continent. In other words, when you hear talk of 54 African nations, that's not anything to jump and sing about. All that means is that during the period of European colonialism, they divided up Africa into these multiple nations, and they said, well, this is Belgium's territory, this belongs to France, this belongs to Germany, and so, you know, partitioning, just like we talked about Korea, the division of Korea, and what that has done to the Korean people. The partitioning of Africa makes it far more difficult for African people, for the African continent to stand up. Too much division. But, and this is the thing, of the 54 African nations, about 48% of them abstained or didn't even take part in the vote in the General Assembly. The United States took abstention, and they should, they're accurate here, they took abstention as an anti-American vote. And so much so that they threaten now, their ally, India, they threatened to put sanctions on India for abstaining. Now, the U.S. wanted war. But more than war, they wanted a global crisis. They're prepared to sacrifice Ukraine, and Ukraine only for the fact that the Russians have not gone into Ukraine the way that the United States went into Iraq. In other words, they didn't send the military, they sent the Air Force and the Navy with missiles and bombs and destroyed cities and villages, and then they sent the U.S. Army in. That's not what the Russians are doing. They're trying to go slow, they're trying to go soft, and they're trying, one, to prevent a mass kind of death toll and destruction of cities. We can talk more about that. However, here's the problem. With all of the PR, with all of the attempt to control the media in this country, because it's not everywhere in the world, and when they talk about the international community, in fact, and I just satirically refer to the whole U.S. thing as a White Lives Matter movement. You know? Yeah, it's a White Lives Matter thing. The only life and the only opinion that matters are European lives and European opinions. So the international community, consisting of NATO, the European Union, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, you get the picture? So the rest of the world don't count. So I said, this is a White Lives Matter movement. And the difference in the way, and the Arab countries have picked up on this, and you know, the way they treat, don't let a Ukrainian get scratched. This is a human rights violation. But the Israelis can kill Palestinians on a regular basis, shoot down children and everything. Oh, that ain't no big thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So what they're saying to the world is that the white agenda should be the world's agenda. And what the world is saying is that the white agenda is the white agenda. But we got our own agenda. Now, Biden, and I've said this on many occasions, Biden is early stages of Alzheimer. He don't know what's going on from day to day. You know, the guy is stumbling, the guy is forgetting where he's at, but, you know, I don't want to put a cat down because he's ill. But don't try to be a big bully in the world. So now, yesterday, he had a video conference with Xi Jinping, the head of China. Okay. I mean, it takes a lot for a cat with his mental capacity to try to even conversate with Xi Jinping. I mean, Xi Jinping is a highly educated man. He's educated in law and political philosophy. He's the leader of a party of 95 million people, a country of 1.5 billion, the second or first largest economy according to how you measure it. The man is no joke, you know, and he represents. Biden has approval ratings of like 41%, even with all the propaganda of war, disapproval rates in the high 50s. Xi's approval ratings are in the 80s. I mean, so now Biden is going to go over there, well, at least on video, and say to Xi Jinping, if you don't condemn Russia, then you're going to pay a price. Now, I'm in a church, so I can't say what I'm certain Xi Jinping said, but it's something having to do with kiss my behind, both cheeks. You know? And that's literally what Xi Jinping said. And the end kiss where I sit down, and both cheeks meet each side. You know? But so we have arrived at a moment of absurdity. It does not make sense. They will not win. They can win the propaganda and information war because they're set up for that. Very few countries are set up to lie to the world. This is unbelievable that the U.S. has mastered that. They call it communications. So you get all these cats that I'm going to get my PhD in communications. Oh, you say, oh, you're going to be a professional liar. But, so they have that. They can dominate that. But the world does not believe them any longer. They don't believe them. You know, the Serbians don't believe them. The Libyans don't believe them. The United Arab Emirates don't believe them. In fact, Biden has had calls in to the Saudi Arabian government, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar. These are major Gulf oil producing states. And it's so interesting, they won't even return his call. Am I lying, Jerry? You know, they don't. In other words, this is a call from the President of the United States. The other end, bang, hang it up. You know, don't call, ain't nobody home. You know? This is unbelievable. And as far as the American people are war exhausted. They don't want war. This is a political fact that we cannot be unmindful of. So all of the claim the American people are counter-revolutionary, fascist, you know, all of that you hear from the left, don't believe the hype. A war-exhausted people who live in uncertainty and fear about their future. The economy is not what they're telling us. Inflation, by the way, is much higher than they're telling us. Europe is predicted by everybody to go into what they call stagflation. The economy stagnates, but inflation continues to rise. Some people say there's no such thing as stagflation. They say it's really recession inflation or depression inflation. See, in economic theory, when an economy goes down, when an economy goes into a recession, goes into a downturn, that is supposed to be one of the ways that inflation is eliminated. So you will get like if I'm talking too much, I don't mean to. The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, right? And they're doing it little by little by little. We don't want to hurt the banks, But the idea, the theory is to slow the economy down. The economy, as they say, is overheated. Slow it down so you slow down inflation. Inflation is politically very consequential, economically consequential. If inflation gets out of control, it can go to hyperinflation, where the money ain't worth nothing no more. And therefore, countries like Saudi Arabia are saying, look, we want to trade in oil with China, but we don't want to use the dollar anymore. We want to use the yuan or renminbi. In other words, we will use the currency of China as a reserve currency. So we have the Chinese currency in our central bank. So when China buys oil, they don't have to come with a suitcase loads of renminbi to Saudi Arabia. It's already there in the reserve bank, and they just draw on the account. See, that's a reserve. You hold that money in reserve. And increasingly, for example, India and Russia, if they don't trade in rubles and rupees, rubles, Russia, rupees, India's currency, they will do a barter deal. Okay, you're giving us natural gas or oil, which we need in our economy, and we will trade or give you, whatever manufacturing goods from the manufacturing sector of India. Or we will use a third currency, let us say the Chinese renminbi, as a way to determine the value of each of our currencies. In other words, if you don't use gold, we'll use the renminbi. We'll use the Chinese currency. This is increasingly limiting the role of the dollar in international relations. You say, well, why are they doing this? Well, they're doing it for a lot of reasons. One, because they've seen, and this is not hyperbole, the outlaw nature of the U.S. government. What does it mean for the U.S. to take $300 billion of Russian money that's in the American Central Bank for the purposes of trade? What does it mean? We're going to just seize it. It's ours now. Right. It's yours. I mean, that's a gangster move of the highest order. But yet, we represent democracy in the world. Well, you just stole my money. You understand what I'm saying? You took my money. Now, but the propaganda, when you look at television, and like I tell all my friends, Tony, what's going on? I said, first of all, let me just tell you the first thing, because I can't explain everything in the time that I have or you have, and you ain't going to listen no way. I'm so tired of these black people calling me. first thing you got to do, turn the television off. Anything you hear on CNN or MSNBC or any of the mainstream media is an out and out lie. You're being lied to. You're being took. You're being had. You're being bamboozled. Now, if that's your comfort zone, leave me alone. I don't want to have no conversation. And I've cut, I mean, really, you talk about canceling people on Facebook. I've cut people off the phone. I don't wait for them to get to Facebook. I'm cutting you off on the phone, man. But, you know, but the thing is, in spite of that, there's an unease in the American people. Unease. You understand? People will say one thing because they think that's what they should say. But then, after they say it, well, I don't know whether I said the right thing. Shit don't look that good. But I want to say this, light at the end of the tunnel. This system of Pax Americana, Pax Americana, Pax goes back to the Latin peace. Pax Romana, the peace of the Roman Empire, which is not peace at all. It's imperial hegemony. Pax Americana is not peace at all. It is hegemony. The undoing of the system of Pax Americana. They cannot go into Ukraine. NATO can't do that. You know why? Not because they're good people, but they would be defeated militarily. They would be defeated. All of this hype about the Russian army has been slowed down in its Hey man, everybody, now I would just suggest a couple people go to YouTube and check out Douglas McGregor, Colonel Douglas McGregor, or I don't know what Sergeant, Lieutenant, Captain, Scott Ritter. I mean, it's just all over the place. People who will say, no, this is the way the Russians fight. This guy, Zelensky, the so-called president, I hate to break you the hard news to you. All in press conferences and stuff, they're not in Ukraine. They're in Poland. The guy is fled. And they, you know, shuffling back and forth, walk around the street, and then they shuffling back to Poland.
Well, it's against a green screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, they show videos of him supposedly speaking in the streets of Ukraine, but you can tell very clearly it's a green screen. So he's not there.
No, he's not there.
Yeah.
He's not there. And, I mean, the guy's not even the president.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's really gotten bad now. Oh, go get it, Jerry. You. I mean, the thing, you know, the other thing is, I just want to say, if you feel like breaking out laughing, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's just that fun. But
well, I don't know if people saw, but Zelensky gave a video address before Congress this past week, and it was very clear he did not write that. Someone, like some American, wrote that for him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, you know, Americans, you remember Pearl Harbor and 9/11
and Martin Luther King.
And he was like, and Martin Luther King, and he was like, I have a dream.
Just like Martin Luther King.
America will send us fighter jets.
Install
a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which would entail World War III. It was literally insane. But it's like, I mean, a lot of people have said this online, but he's really playing into like American culture, this whole Marvel culture, where he like, you know, like Marvel movies. It's like Americans have been trained to only understand the world in terms of these very simplistic heroes, the Hollywood thing, and because Zelensky has been very well constructed to fit that role. People are like, oh, like if they make a movie about him, he should be played by like this actor, you know, that kind of thing. And he's already, it seems like being prepared to, you know, like
Churchill.
To play that role, even if he's shipped over to the U.S. because he can't even do anything in Ukraine.
Yeah, and it's.
I mean, he was wearing like a muscle T-shirt.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, is that a muscle? You mean that's not his real muscles?
I mean, it was cut in a certain way to make him look very like athletic.
Like he's combat ready.
Yeah, he's combat ready. Oh yeah, unshaven.
Ready to go in and
at any moment.
Yeah.
Don't come up in here because I'm ready to take it. But
Oh yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, you know, the history, this natural affinity the darker nations have with Russia, really going back to the Soviet Union, like the Ugandan, I forget who he is.
Yes.
That was so beautiful what he said. He's like, the darker nations, we stand with Russia. There's no non-white people who don't stand with Russia. And I was actually thinking, Doc, when you read, I think it was Du Bois's obituary of Stalin on WRD. And that was so beautiful. Yeah, that was beautiful. But I remember someone called and he said, this is why they hate Russia so much, because Russia never had any colonies.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like, and even Ukraine, I mean, they did the opposite of colonialism. Always with the darker, it's you develop the countries that you underdeveloped. And I feel like that history is coming out again and it's relevant. And they're doing everything they can. Like there's this woman at Penn who's a historian. Oh my God, she's basically a CIA asset.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's horrible to see the way they're trying to weaponize Black America and Black history to support colonialism. Or that Kenyan ambassador who's saying, it just made me sick to see it.
That's interesting to say that, because Sun Yat-sen made a speech where he talked about white supremacy, and he mentioned in that speech, I wish I could read it to you here, because I read it to my class sometimes, where he mentions that the white world, and then he talks about the Soviet Union is the only one, the white Soviet Union is the only one they hate, that the white nations will hate them. And Sun Yat-sen, who is the father of modern day China,
Yes.
correct? He said that, he talks about the white and the yellow races of the world, etc. In his speech. So and a lot of people don't know that.
Or when Lenin's what was it again? Europe backwards Europe,
advanced Asia.
This is, it's. Oh, go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to add that people should read Putin's most recent speech that he gave to the Russian people, and it's also partially addressed to the people in the West. But it's just, especially when you compare it to Zelensky, who can only give you like these, I don't know, like very superficial slogans. Like he goes very in depth of like, okay, this is how we're going to survive the sanctions. This is also the international situation, but it's very clear that he sees it in the terms of a civilizational question. Because there's a part where, and also like a racial civilizational question where he says, he's talking about, what will be the effects of sanctions, but he's also addressing those Russians and people in Russia who like may have interests which go against their own country. What he calls like a fifth column, and then he says, I do not in the least condemn those Russians who have villas in Miami or the French Riviera, and who cannot make do without foie gras, oysters, or gender freedom, as they call it. That is not the problem, not at all. The problem, again, is that many of these Russians are essentially over there in their minds and not here with our people and with Russia. In their opinion, it is a sign of belonging to the superior caste, superior race. People like this would sell their own mothers just to be allowed to sit on the entry bench of the superior caste. They want to be just like them and imitate them in everything. But they forget or just completely fail to see that even if this so-called superior caste needs them, it needs them as expendable raw material to inflict maximum damage on our people. And he continues and says, the so-called collective West and its fifth column are accustomed to measuring everything and everyone by their own standards. They believe that everything is for sale and everything can be bought, and therefore they think we will break down and back off. But they do not know our history and our people well enough. Indeed, many countries around the world have long put up with living with their backs bent, obsequiously accepting all the decisions that come from their sovereign, the U.S., looking up to it subserviently. this is how many countries live, unfortunately, in Europe as well. But Russia will never be seen in such a miserable and humiliated situation. And the fight we are waging is the fight for our sovereignty and the future of our country and our children. We will fight for the right to be and remain Russia. And yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, he also like speaks directly to like Americans, and he's like, you know, they're trying to tell you that this inflation, all these problems in your country are because of us, but it's because of your ruling. He like said, it's your ruling class, you know, and I think it's like I feel like time and time again throughout history, Russia has been the first to make that historic leap. You know, with the Russian Revolution, with sacrificing to defeat fascism during World War II, and they never get any credit for it, except amongst the darker peoples of the world.
That's right.
And I think, yeah, Emily had shared this article from the New York Times about how, like, when you actually ask people from the darker nations how they feel, many of them look up to Russia, or they understand why Russia is doing what it's doing, or at least they are much more ambivalent about being like, I don't really believe what the West is trying to spin this as. And I think like the example that Russia is trying is setting, you know, with not being afraid to completely break from the Western system. As much as earlier they had tried to, you know, like work with the US, work with the West, but realizing that, you know, like the West, like these Western elites will always have nothing but scorn and disgust for the Russian people. You know, and you know, they're not afraid to break from that system and to be like, no, we can like build something, an alternative. And I saw an interesting analysis which was about basically why did the US push for this specific conflict between Russia and the West when, you know, like hypothetically it should be China which is the main target. But interestingly, what I read this article that was saying like Russia is almost like a test case of what they think they can do against a much larger opponent, which is China. And also because Russia it's slightly more easier to de-link from Russia compared to China because of how integrated like China and Western economies have become over the past couple decades. But it actually reminded me of Japan and the atomic bomb when the U.S. was trying to send a message to the Soviet Union. You know, even they didn't need to drop the bomb, but they dropped it on Japan in order to send a message to the Soviet Union and to Asia, like this is what we can do to you. And in the same way, they talked about these levels of sanctions against the Russian central bank as the nuclear option. And I don't think they're
They call it that, yeah.
They called it the nuclear option. Like nothing of this scale has ever been attempted against an economy of that size.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think. I think the American people would do well to actually, even to just try to understand where like the Russians are coming from. Because I think in many ways it also sets an example for Americans. Like it is possible to stand up to this ruling class, and it's also possible to not accept the terms that they present to you as this is reality. And you can define your own reality. You know, and it's just like even in the inflation stuff, you know, the White House, they're trying to be like, you know, sometimes it's worthwhile to sacrifice for democracy, you know, and then Pete Buttigieg is like, you know, if you don't like the rising gas prices so much, you know, just buy an electric car, or stuff like that, you know, or take a bus, you know, like, or ride your bike, you know.
Right, or your skateboard.
Right, but it's also like people don't, like, it's so completely removed from reality when literally all of, you know, even if people ride electric cars, all of modern, like, industrial civilization still depends on, you know, gas. You know, how do you think people's, like, the entire infrastructure of, like, Amazon, for instance, you think that they can survive without, you know, like, people can get all of their, like, logistics without gas? You know, and it's just, like, I think the ruling elite has taken lead from reality, but they also want to drag the rest of the American
Or may I ask you a question, Jerry?
Yeah.
Doesn't this, no. I mean, but doesn't this say why it is necessary to study philosophy? Because is this not the ultimate in postmodern subjective idealism? The world, I mean, it's not just reality, but they're going to create ultimate reality. And ultimate reality is what we say it is, not what it is. This is, I mean, I think it's like entering the theater of the absurd, where a group of powerful elites, especially in the United States, say we can reshape the world to be what we say it is. Not just what we want it to be, but what we say it is. And if we are powerful enough and astute enough, we can convince the world's people. And this is, I would say, this brings us back into the ideological struggle, but at another level.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me just make one quick point. See, you know, where peace and the working class were unimportant to the so-called, quote, cultural left, where, you know, you get the University of Pennsylvania, 6'4" male, biological male, who says, gender-wise, I'm a female, and I'm going to have y'all believe that, and I'm going to beat all the biological women, and it's true because I say it's true, or because a powerful authority like the University of Pennsylvania says it's so. And I think we're back to all of the ideological questions that go back to the 17th century in philosophy, Anglo-American philosophy, and American pragmatism, or as they say, pragmatism without foundations. And so it is a philosophical, ideological struggle to figure out, well, they keep talking about how is Putin thinking? I want to know how y'all are thinking. There's something wrong. It's psychological, but it is also a philosophical question. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jerry.
Well, that is so true because, you know, that guy Alexander Mercouris that you follow.
Oh yeah.
No, I really recommend that people listen
heavily,
to him and
yes.
his channel, The Duran, because they just it's this guy. If you just look up The Duran, DURAN on YouTube or like any channel.
And Alexander has his own channel.
Yeah.
It's he's the best analyst.
Great analysis. Because one of the things that he points out is Westerners assume that Russia is proceeding from the same assumption that the West proceeds from, but they're not.
Yeah.
He talks about Clausewitz actually.
Clausewitz, he did.
That you've been
my man.
Yeah, talking about a lot. But one of the things, because you know, even amongst like the anti-war left in the U.S., they're like, no war, we need negotiations. But it's like negotiations have been happening this whole time.
That's right.
Between the Russians and the Ukrainians, because the Russians proceed from this thing of there's no like that. Basically, the military and the diplomatic are they're part of the same thing, and you can do both at once.
That's right.
And they've been holding negotiations with the Ukrainians throughout this entire conflict. But then the left is like, in the U.S., it's like no war, we need like negotiations. But it's like they don't understand that the Russians are proceeding from a very different philosophical base compared to what the U.S. elites proceed from. So yeah, I think the question of philosophy and of assumptions and ideology is playing out really interestingly in this conflict.
But you know what it also shows is that people educated in the elite American university system cannot think. Yeah. And they should not be relied upon. And hence the free school and things like this. No, there have to be places where people can think. If you go, and you all, I mean, you all can tell this story better than anybody, better than you and I do, because they are graduates of elite universities. I'm not putting that down, by the way, but you know them. And, I mean, they specialize in teaching you how not to think. How not to think. So the American elite which are coming out of these universities cannot think. As you say, they're proceeding from assumptions that are not connected to reality. And since, they denied Hegel, which is very important, which meant they denied Marx and Lenin, which is very, very important. And I don't care what Putin says, Russia still thinks in the framework of Leninism. It's very interesting that they could overthrow the Soviet Union, but the philosophy, which had been taught to several generations of Soviet people in these universities, and they had a very superior university system. And we could see it in the books, and so I gave their writings on physics and stuff, and Eddie and so on. This stuff is way more advanced than in the United States. So they did have a higher level of education. Putin, he might want to act like, oh, the church is all that. No, but you think like Lenin. By that I mean that their form of thought is Leninist. The same thing with Xi Jinping. He thinks in the same way that Mao and Zhou Enlai, the framework, which I just want to say my last thing, and I get this from what you said, Jeremiah, that Russia has represented in historical terms a vanguard, the Russian Revolution. Rather, and this is where Gorbachev needs a foot up his stupid behind, the assumption that the Russian Revolution was an anomaly, was abnormal. The Russian Revolution, and this is what Putin is finding out, for the Russian people and for Russian history, is as normal as anything in Russian history. Perhaps it is a confirmation of the normal trajectory. This is what Tolstoy was writing about in War and Peace. You know what I'm saying? The peasants. It's all in Russian history. So we are not thinking. We do not know how to think. By we, I'm talking about the educated classes. They do. And they have an advantage. That anyone that could think in this moment has an advantage. Even small groups like ours, there's an advantage. You can think. You have ideas. That is filtered into a society in chaos. And you never know how this is going to end up. But that's, go, Seraphine, I'm sorry.
No, it's reaching 2 o'clock, so.
Okay. Oh yeah, we have to get ready to go, y'all. Okay, it's been good.
If anyone wants to take some of the photos that we have put up at the event, please feel free. I think it's such a shame for somebody like you just hold this with them and not share. Yep. All I wanted to say was
thank you.
I don't know if you like, I sit around.
Like only they play online.
I was going to say, are they from Sudan as well?
No.
No, I'm kidding.
Because they have so many.